is Underground Over the Air, episode number 5. I'm Zoe Roten-Heinsman.
And I'm Chris DiLoretto. Welcome to the Space Lounge. So we're here with sitting by the Christmas tree in my living room with masks on, of course. And we're just filled with holiday cheer because throughout all of the struggles and trials and the slowdowns and the general feeling of walking through very thick mud at all times, we were able, I think a couple weeks ago at this point, to finally publish our 2 themed collections that we have been working on for many months. They were due out in August, by the way.
Yes. That did not happen, but but I've been saying for a while now that they needed to come at their own time,
Yes.
and the time that was right for them, and it sure feels right and wonderful.
I completely agree. And, the fact is, I kind of knew looking at the signs and the space weather that once we had kind of crossed into September, that most likely there was going to be a couple more months of work to go. But we are extremely proud and extremely pleased with the results.
Yes. And I think last time we talked, we were talking about our own pieces, which
That's
were
right.
the
Which
main
turned
hold
out-
up.
and they turned out quite different than what we described in some cases anyways.
Yes, but I have to say, in the spiritual collection, Spiritus Oppidum, Volume 1,
Yes.
it contains my favorite thing that I've ever read of yours. And I've read
thank you.
many of your things.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Actually, some of our listeners probably didn't even hear that conversation because that was on the subscribers feed. So that's a really great reminder for everyone, though, that if you want to support us and get access to some of these more exclusive behind-the-scenes conversations where we cover like the writing process in some cases, feel free to subscribe at patreon.com/Monadnock Underground. But in any case, that wasn't the scheduled plug for that in this episode. We'll cover that again later. But so in sum, we wanted to put out a couple of trade paperbacks, anthologies, that would contain a number of short pieces along a theme. So as Zoe mentioned, Spiritus Oppidum, Volume 1. And the Volume 1 isn't just being cheeky. We do intend to do another spiritual collection someday. But again, this is a collection of spiritual writings that range from poetry, prose, fiction, personal essay, and there's even one like script style dramatic piece. And then for our second collection we put out, it's called Demiurges and Demigods in Space, Volume 1. And that is our collection of speculative fiction.
And this one has superhero stuff, mythology, gods. There really are demigods involved.
Yep. The title is not a lie.
It's not a lie. But that one is all fiction. And there's
Correct.
some shorter pieces,
Correct.
some longer pieces.
There is no nonfiction science fiction in here.
Well, I was thinking no poetry.
Oh, true. Yes.
It's
fair.
all like no
Yes,
scripts.
Yes, correct. It is all basically the same medium in this one. And what we have, so Zoe and I did succeed at least contributing one piece to each, which our crazy ambitions at the beginning, for those of you who don't know, was that we would each contribute 2 pieces to each.
That was your ambition. I'm not as fast a writer as you, and I'm aware of that.
Well, that's the moral is I didn't write fast this time either, which is kind of the problem. But not that it was a problem because everything did work out. But between these 2 pieces, we have between these 2 collections, we have 24 pieces from 21 different authors. And while we love and cherish our friends from abroad, so to say, I will say the vast majority of the writers in these 2 collections are Granite State based. We did, of course, no collection would be complete without our good friend from Philadelphia, Jared Radke, among many others who have joined us.
Well, and that proves me wrong because he contributed some delightful recipes to that collection. So
he certainly did.
Some non-fictional recipes.
He certainly did. And I think that you can expect in an upcoming episode early next year for us to have Jared on, both explaining his recipes in a narrative fashion, as well as to sit down with us and have a nice conversation.
Sounds great.
He's a gem.
He's probably my number one person I've never met that I really want to hang out with at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So if you would like to read both of these fine collections, and you're local to Peterborough and you'd like them before Christmas, please reach out. We can work out a delivery or pickup situation. Otherwise, you can order them from our website, monadnockunderground.com. And we're also hoping to have them in the Toadstool possibly before Christmas, but no promises.
Yeah, we're waiting to hear back from Willard Toadstool as we speak. So these are trade paperbacks. They got a nice feel to them. They've got a really nice cover design, and they are very affordable at only $12 each. And we'll give you a deal if you want to get both of them. It's 2 for $20. But they will be available on our website at any time. It's just a matter of shipping. And the state of shipping and the postal service and everything. It is, by the time this episode comes out, it'll probably be a week from Christmas Eve or a week from Christmas Day, because I do think we'll get this out this week. And I don't think that gives you. There's no way we'll ship it to you in time if you're far away.
It's true.
Yeah. That being said, though, they will be available there. They are available at Amazon.com. If for some reason you want us to get less of a cut, but you still want a copy, Amazon will send it to you. And although at the same time, if you are a Kindle reader, if you want a Kindle format copy, you have to go to Amazon.com for that. And we do recommend that you do so because it is also available as an ebook. And for today's episode, this is some of the first content that we are revealing from these collections. So far, we haven't actually published any sneak previews online, although those will start coming hard and fast within a couple of weeks. But what we have immediately following our opening segment today is the opening piece from Demiurges and Demigods in Space, which is a tale called Jobber by a friend of mine named Jeff Derego, who's a many times published author in New Hampshire. He's had some really interesting things that we will then talk to him about at during the interview portion of the episode.
And fellow podcaster.
Exactly. Yes, he's had a couple of shows. He's had some audio success, and he is a real treat as a guest.
And he is joined by one of our favorites, Dan Szczesny, who pops in near the end of his interview. Jeff and Dan are old friends.
They go back a long ways.
And they've got many tales.
Yeah, and because I knew that, I met Jeff and Dan totally separate from one another and only found out later that they also knew each other and were like blood brothers, basically. You'll hear it. So we didn't tell Jeff that Dan was going to join us. We thought it'd be kind of a fun surprise. So Dan sort of just pops in, and boy, the two of them take that ball and run with it.
They should have their own podcast. I think.
They should, honestly. Maybe we should do a thing. We'll let them do host some episodes. Like they could be guest hosts. I think that would be a lot of fun, and you'll hear it later on. This is not an interview to skip because they take us on kind of a wild ride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a conversation I think of often.
I don't remember how many questions we actually had to ask because each one just sent us on a journey.
Many little journeys were taken during that conversation.
Yeah, really, really a lot of fun. And his piece in the book is also a ton of fun.
Yeah, it's a superhero piece. Not to give any spoilers, but if you're a fan of superheroes, you don't want to miss that one.
Yeah, and I should say too, it's almost trite to say it's like superheroes from another angle or whatever, but it is, and he pulls it off, even though he really owns it and does it justice.
Yeah,
and it's a pleasure to have that in the collection.
I'm not even a huge superhero fan.
Oh, me either. No, but
really
it's very
piece.
It's very creative and cool. And I assume this was probably your first science fiction story you ever wrote, right?
I don't know. That's a great question. I'll have to think back to fourth grade because I don't think I can answer that honestly.
Yeah.
Certainly,
going back that far.
Certainly as an adult. Yes.
Yeah, and even within the confines of Monadnock Underground, this is only your second fiction piece?
Is that true?
With the gas station?
Yeah,
and
probably.
then this one, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
All right.
So
It
it's
just
cool.
it feels like they both took a really long time. Those are like the two pieces in these collections, and the gas station piece is all I have written this year.
Yeah.
But that's not like the worst year.
No, definitely not. No, I still think that's quite successful, and certainly, I mean, we keep making reference at this point. It almost feels like a running joke to the fact that I wrote a book back in like April and May, because of course
Which I've now forgotten April, so I've stopped making the joke because that
yeah.
feels like 3 years ago.
And it was, but I did write that book, and it is going to be edited. We actually hope to have it come out around the start of Lent of 2021. So it's coming. It is a real thing. It's not just a joke. But we haven't edited it yet, and I put, there was this massive output right during this 2-month period of time, and since then though, pretty much all I've written is the pieces that went into these collections myself. So,
Yeah.
so it's like, yeah. I mean, I wrote a book, but that was like a long time ago. And since then, there's just been these two pieces. Now, granted, I did end up very happy myself with the two pieces.
Yeah.
So I don't really feel bad. I can't write short things. My space opera in Demiurges and Demigods in Space. It's definitely the longest piece in here. Although, just so you don't think that I'm entirely selfish, we don't really put word count caps on our other writers either. And we have another very long piece in sci-fi, and then Stephen Atherton wrote an extremely long one. I think the longest one in Spiritus Oppidum as well. So I'm not just hogging up all the room here, but boy, I don't know how many thousands. I think. What did I get it up to? Like it was like 30 or 40,000 words, or not that? No, 20,000 maybe. And then I cut it down.
Oh, that's how long it was when you first wrote it.
Well, I only cut 3,000 out of it.
It just doesn't feel that long to me.
Yeah, well, I like
having read it like 4 times.
Yeah, it all needed to be in there, right?
It really did.
Right.
It really did.
Yeah, but Zoe wrote a sci-fi tale about. Why don't you?
You give your summary. I want to hear it.
It's
from
called
your point of view.
Blackberries on Mars, and it's this really interesting look at an unconventional family dynamic that centers around a death, which happens. I'm not spoiling anything. It happens off screen before the story begins, and there's kind of relatives that aren't particularly close that come together, and different ways of life, and even different planetary. Different planets of origin or different planets of residence, because the guest is coming from Mars back down to Earth, and there's a cultural clash as well that is really the driving force behind the story, because the folks that he's visiting are members of a really strange kind of old-fashioned commune that's nature-based, and it's very foreign to him, and it's really cool. It's filled with tension around all of those dynamics and differences, and it feels very real. And it's a sci-fi tale, you know what I mean? But it feels very immediate and cool. So it's a very fun piece to have in the collection.
Thanks.
And the in the Spirit collection, like I said, it really runs the gamut. I mean, we've got one or two pieces that are sort of traditional, even Christian leaning, like faith-based essays.
I wouldn't even say leaning. There's one that's very unapologetically Christian.
Yes.
But they're not all. I mean, we cover spirituality from a lot of different interpretations,
a lot of different angles, and I mean, I don't even know what you would call mine. I told a story that is all it is, and well, it's not. I guess maybe all it is the wrong way to put it, but you can summarize the story by saying it is two characters playing a game in Putnam Park in the center of Peterborough, even though I don't think I named the park in there, but anybody around here will know what I mean. And the two characters are the river spirit of the River Kentucook and the archangel Uriel. And they have a history together. And there's how would you describe it beyond that?
that's like the little blurb summary of it.
Correct.
But like,
yes.
without getting too much into the plot of it, which really is mostly their ongoing interactions over the course of a strangely familiar year of difficulty. It's just so like emotionally deep. Like that is the way that I feel about it. Like that story makes me like genuinely cry. Like it's just so good. Like there's not like tons and tons of action.
Yeah.
You know, there's not like a ton.
No, they're
like
just
the
playing
plot,
the game.
like you described the whole
just playing the
plot
game.
really.
Yep.
Things happen between them and around them, and
there's a leprechaun.
and the year moves on.
Yeah, we go through the course of a year. This year.
But it's just like so. You just have to read it. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you for you are a great salesperson for that story. We appeared at the night market in which was supposed to be a 2-day thing during Peterborough's holiday weekend, but there were which was nice. It was outdoors, but it wasn't too cold. But there was a big snowstorm that shut out the second day. But we had a booth, and we were able to actually sell things outside. And I was doing a little. It wasn't super well. It wasn't super busy, you know. So I was trying to, you know, kind of call people in. And I was putting on my Boston vendor kind of accent. You know, I was like, you know, come get your stories. We got our local writers over here. Original stories. And that sold us a few. Anyways,
yeah, I think it worked.
Yeah, that did. It brought some people.
That was so fun. Like we had, it was just so nice to be at an event like that again. You know, we have a long history of like selling things at the farmers market and,
That's right.
and various
That's right.
booths.
We used to sell mushrooms for socialism. It's another story for another time. We got out of those bad habits a little while ago.
Yep.
We do this instead.
But yeah, we had some of Dan's books on our table, and
Dan Szczesny was nice enough to let us to share our table real estate with him, and as I not so humbly bragged to him, I think I was a pretty good salesman of his books as well.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we sold a few.
Of them,
and we also had books from Bill Chatfield, who was our previous guest from the Peterborough Poetry Project, and we sold some of those too.
Yeah. And I think people really loved seeing like the variety of things we had. It felt like we were, you know, a real publishing company, even though we didn't publish all of those books. We didn't publish
most of them. Yeah. Well, yeah, that is how it felt. And I will say this, I don't know when or how we will exactly be able to do this, just based on, you know, COVID times and how things shape up over the next year. But I do think that come at the longest, say 6 months from now, once we get to summertime, we'll be able to do things like this again. And I fully intend to kind of have that kind of mixed table again. I thought that was really fun. It's very consistent with what we're trying to do here.
We just need a bigger table.
Which is a
a good problem to have.
Exactly. Yes, that's really how I felt. So that was a treat. So thanks everybody who did come out and buy some books there. We did sell. Sales have been pretty brisk actually, but we still do have plenty of copies, and it's likely we'll do a second run if we run down to zero. But think about picking one up. And if you're on the fence, we're going to give you plenty of opportunities to sample some stuff, both in this episode and beyond. We've extended the offer to all of the writers to make recordings of the pieces, or in some cases excerpts of those pieces that we will include in these episodes, and we plan to have some of them on for guests, and especially for anybody. Actually, I was going to say anybody locally, but this isn't an in-person event. We're doing another release party with the Peterborough Town Library. And this, of course, will be conducted over Zoom. And it's going to be, I believe it's Wednesday, January 13th. And that's going to be from 6:30 to 8 p.m. And just double check that is the 13th. So that should be fun. We're also gonna be inviting all of the writers to that, and we'll have some live readings, and we will take questions from other people in the Zoom meeting about the process and about any of the pieces that they have read or maybe had questions on. It's going to be as good of a time as we can possibly have without having an in-person release party. So pick up your copies, join us for one of these things, and as we prepared to put these out, we really haven't been publishing a lot online. I mean, just with the two of us doing everything, that just wasn't possible this fall. And you all know what kind of fall this was. It wasn't possible either. So, but now we are going to inundate you as the year begins. We have some backlog submissions outside of any of these collections, but we are slowly going to put out online versions of what we've published here. So, but please, these are good-looking copies. They look great on your bookshelf. They look, I would argue, prestigious, in fact.
And they look great together.
They look great together. Same artist, similar theme, but different, as you might imagine, between the different subject matters.
And don't forget that when you're buying this book, you're not only supporting our whole project, but we pay our authors.
Yep.
It's been important to us from day one to
And
make
our
sure they
cover
get a
artist.
little something, and our cover artist.
Yeah.
But that's part of what your dollars when you buy the book, or if you subscribe to our Patreon.
Yeah, and that's what the subscription is really about, because, to be honest, beyond the fact that we are naturally not very good business people, we just told you we were selling mushrooms for socialism not that long ago. We're learning, but we're still not that far along the path.
We started out giving away bananas for socialism, so we have come a long way.
We are fast learners. We are fast learners, but we are still not great business people. But the fact of the matter is, we're talking print publishing in an era like today. We're talking local stuff, and we're talking paying at least some small token amount to all of these writers and to the cover artists. We don't like make money on these things. We really do depend upon subscriptions to supplement the cover prices of these things, so that we can keep making that happen. I mean, the point is to put the thing out, and if you believe that's a worthy aim, you can help us out
at patreon.com/Monadnock Underground.
You got it. Exactly. So beyond that, we decided, I have giant stacks of newspapers here because I don't think I've read much more than an article or two in any of them since the last time we sat down, which was September. Yeah, it was.
If you could only see my face right now,
Yeah.
that didn't seem right
So
at all.
I do have like a month's worth of newspapers, but we're going to keep it light, and
That's 3 months.
What did I say?
You said a month.
Oh no, yeah, 3 months. Yeah, we got like 3 months worth of newspapers here, and but we want to get to our contribution with Jobber and the really fun interview that we have coming up. But there's still there's a fair amount still going on in town. It doesn't feel like this is a good moment to satirize anything or really to point fingers. I mean, there's a lot of tension and anguish right now. There's a very, very unfortunate, tragic situation with a place in Peterborough called the Walden Eco Village that, for safety reasons, has been kind of abruptly shut down, displacing a number of residents. And this is obviously a bad time of year and a bad year in general for that to happen. And without wading into any of the kind of details or any of the back and forth about this, we just want to say that our thoughts and our hearts go out to those affected, and we do believe, we hope, and we have faith, but we do kind of firmly believe that there will be some resolution that comes about quickly, that settles this and make sure that people have a roof over their heads for Christmas. Really just a terrible situation, and we are sorry for all of those affected.
And one piece of good news, though, yesterday will go down in history. The great restoration has occurred.
That's right. Now, from my perspective, this has been a much longer journey, although I think in a podcast sense, we only talked about this last episode. So for our listeners, they've only just found out about this, even though this happened in like August or whatever. But I have returned, as predicted and as expected, to the Peterborough, New Hampshire Facebook group after being ignominiously removed.
And you returned as yourself and not...
That's right. Yes, that's
Cristobal de la Resurrección.
That was one plan we talked about. You know, I mean, I privately was thinking maybe Carlos Danger going in as, you know, something like that. Nope, it was on my own. It was thanks to shout out to Kevin Brace, who put in a good word for me. And it also means, you know, I got to be a little careful, or at least take my time a little bit in when I start running my mouth, because then, you know, now poor Kevin's on the hook. Kevin's a really good guy, so not looking to scream. But I have behaved myself, even though there is, of course, controversy going on.
You've managed to do it for a whole day.
Yes,
I mean,
it hasn't been very long.
It's a good start.
It hasn't been very long. I told someone where they can find a Christmas tree. You know,
there you go.
I did make a couple of comments on some of the current events posts, but I didn't get into it. You know,
Yeah.
I was responsibly exercising a little bit of restraint, but it's good to be back. I do feel like I missed the town drama when I'm out of it.
Yeah.
You know, I do have that perverse sense where I want that.
You have to stay informed.
Yeah, it's part of my job. I feel like is to keep abreast of the stupid things people say and think.
I think you mean the goings on of our fine town. Got to stay positive
we are. Yes,
on day 2.
Well, yes, because that's the thing. That's the thing. We're not just trying to stay positive so that I don't get kicked out of the group. We're trying to stay positive because even this year should be a nice time of year, a time filled with cheer and with joy. I think that we are doing our best, and we are doing, as we have the whole year, doing a good job doing that. But I'm not going to lie. Even sitting by this nice Christmas tree that I have here, it doesn't quite feel like the normal Yuletide.
Agreed.
I mean, we're gearing up to watch an online performance of the Christmas Revels from Cambridge this weekend, and that's great. I love the Revels. I'm really happy to watch this. But if you don't know what the Revels are, look them up. Their performances, you do have to be like it's part of it is the immersive experience of being there, and there's songs that you sing along together, and everybody dances out to the hallway together in the middle of the thing.
I remember last year there were like choir members up in the balcony,
Yes.
like surrounding us. That was one of the most beautiful moments.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so unique. Is it's a mix of music and theater, but not in a musical theater sort of way, but in a form that feels much older, and that harkens back to a time when, before some of the modern forms of entertainment that we have, people would get together and be rowdy and sing together, and kind of put on these things for one another. And it's a very magical thing, and it requires people to be in a place together. And it's a bummer. But like I said, we're determined, and we're kind of, we're doing everything that we can responsibly and safely and within reason, without being totally disingenuous. But we should all pat ourselves on the back because we are in the home stretch here.
Yes, of 2020. It's almost there.
And you know what? People are going to tell you, like, yeah, you think it's like magical, and then on like 12 o'clock on January 1st, like it's like different. It's like, no, like none of us are idiots. It's okay. Don't listen to those people, though, because it is pretty unlikely that when you look back on 2021, you're going to see it as difficult as 2020. I will say that. Like the underlying problems and all that do not magically vanish, but I promise you will end 2021 in a different place than you're feeling right now.
Yeah.
This year will be worse than next year.
See, I don't know. I feel like maybe there is a little something to be said about when the date changes, having some kind of attached magic to it.
Oh yeah, and I don't disagree with that at all. And I have felt that way about many years. Like I had going back, like one of my worst years, which from a personal perspective was certainly worse than 2020 for me. Not from an overall, weather and vibe sort of thing, but it was 2008, and New Year's Eve 2007 for me ended on this really sour note. Like it wasn't anything. It's not even a good story. It's like I got into I was out at a bar. There was heavy drinking, right? And like a friend of mine, a female friend of mine, nothing romantic, but like she just sort of started in on me and started saying like weird stuff like I'm never going to be happy about me. You know what I mean? Like it was just
she cursed you.
Yeah, she did. No, but that's what happened. Yeah, no, really, it was like that. And so I ended 2007 on this incredibly sour note.
Yeah.
And I never believed that sour note caused 2008. I thought it foretold it.
Yeah,
I was like, the way that night went down is a bad sign of what's to come.
Yeah.
And it was like that in 2009 was not the same. 2007 was not this. You know what I mean? There was something about that year in particular. So this has happened to me on a smaller personal level certainly before. And I knew in that year, though, I knew a lot of other people who had bad years.
Yeah.
It wasn't like 2019 or 2020, but at the time, it was more pronounced, I felt, than other years.
Yeah. I'm going to have to look back because I feel like we've talked about this before and I couldn't remember 2008 and I still don't. I'm sure something interesting happened, but I can't bring it to mind at all.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of messy years and made a lot of mistakes, but the concentration of mistakes and mess in 2008 is far greater than any other year that I can name.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I was trying to think, how did I ring in 2020? And I was with my brother, which was awesome, but I had bought him these really terrible sodas, like ranch dressing flavored soda and like corn flavored soda.
Yeah.
And
was that from Japan?
We drank them. No, I just bought them on Amazon just as a weird present. And so we were drinking those, and maybe we caused this in some way. Ranch dressing soda caused this.
Yeah, I cannot, on my end, explain 2020 based on my New Year's. I had a pretty good New Year's. It was just us and another couple, and I bought a special bottle of tequila for the occasion, and it was a good,
Yeah.
I think I have partially superstitiously not bought that. It's called Pasote, I think. It was really good. It was very, very clean, clear, no burn, delicious tequila. But I have not bought another bottle of that since, and I think that it's out of the superstition, not because I had a bad night that night, because I had a bunch of fun, but I was like, that was the tequila that rang in 2020. But I don't know, I'll buy it again because it was good.
Well, I'm definitely not buying ranch dressing soda again.
Oh, yeah.
For any reason.
Yeah, don't do that. I have already said that I definitely want to shoot off at least a couple of fireworks at midnight. And I don't know. If people don't like that, like tough shit, you should like that. If you're out there and you're listening to this and the idea of a firework going off at 12:01 on 2021 sounds bad to you, rethink that, because you should like that.
Yeah.
Everyone should like that. There should be loud noises when this year is over.
Yeah.
You know?
Midnight bicycle parades.
Boom.
And
boom,
fireworks.
Boom. Yeah. All over the place. So that's what we're heading towards. We are sort of stumbling through the end of the year, but I am proud of what we've accomplished. And I am grateful that we're still standing. I haven't had any tubes forced down my throat yet. Knock on wood. And
there are still like a couple more weeks left. I mean,
I know it's not too late. It's not too late.
Don't tempt fate here.
I know, but you know how it is. Once it gets to this point, you just sort of roll to the end.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sort of. I still have my birthday, so.
Yeah, well, that's exciting, but that's probably
exciting.
not something that's going to like change your fortune bad.
Oh, right. Yeah, true. I just mean like the end of the year doesn't like quite roll off into the, because I'm usually like celebrating a lot.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm celebrating a lot. I just mean like in terms of like the events though of the year and like the things that could happen to you, I mean, granted, I think I've gotten the last time I got arrested, which was 2006. It was around this time, right around this time.
Yeah.
So there is still time for bad things to happen.
See, for a lot of years, I didn't celebrate New Year's Eve at all because somebody really important to me died on New Year's Eve.
Oh yeah, that's fucked up. Yeah, it's a tough memory to get over. Yeah, I don't blame you there.
That year didn't end well.
New Year's Eve. Well, see, ever since that time though, going into 2008, I became a New Year's skeptic. You know what I mean? Where that doesn't mean that I consistently avoided New Year's after that, but like every year it would be sort of a, do I need to do this? Do I, you know what I mean? Like, or is it better to just hunker down at home and avoid these kind of problems? But in the last few years, I have not done that. I've at least had company or gone somewhere.
Yeah. Well, this year the kids are staying up. I'm going to force them to, whether they understand it or not.
Everybody's staying up, and they're going to remember.
Yep,
that's right. That's right. And hopefully, that lady that we talked about last time doesn't get her way, and the kids have elections and like vote us out because we did this. But I don't expect that to happen. Because, like I said last time, they're the ones up for re-election, not me. And on that note, let's take a look at Jeff Derego's Jobber. Thanks for sticking with us this year, everybody. It's been a blast. I might have said it earlier, but if I didn't, we're not going to do a story at the end of this. So after the interview concludes, you will hear our closing music, and that will be the end of the episode. But because we are part of that is out of a drive to get some more of these author recordings out. When we do, as you know from our episode 4 and how that was the time travel episode, because it was recorded in September, about August, with the latest parts of it recorded in October, and it came out in November. So it spans a wide range of time because sometimes it takes us a long time and we record something and we sit on it. But when we do these things with writer recordings and some of these interviews, especially since we just put these books out, we want to get these interviews out. So we might skip a few of those stories. We might, you're probably going to have to wait till like spring sometime before we get back into any kind of dramatic presentations. But we will get back to that. So you can expect some faster episode turnaround. There just might be a little less wizardry, if that's okay.
Well, the wizard is the one that has the debt to pay.
That's right.
So he'll get to it in 2021.
That is true. I'm the one who's continually running a deficit on my storytelling hours. But I don't know, though. I think I get some points for what I put in the books, probably, because they are both stories, right?
That's very fair.
And the book, once we do put it out, that's going to count for a bunch as well. That gives me a bunch of hours. But as I said when I started the series of Wizard of Monadnock Storytime, I'm in such a hole that it will take a decade to get out of it, even under the best of circumstances. So
a few more books at least.
I'll be back. All right, everybody. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Solstice, Yo Saturnalia, anything else you can think of. Celebrate. Have a good time. Get some rest. Feel good. We'll talk to you soon. See you at the Other Side Cafe.
Jobber by Jeffrey R. Derego. We're on vacation. Mary stands at the window looking out over the rolling hills just dotted with the beginnings of fall foliage. I stoked up the wood stove, though it's not really cold enough to warrant a fire. It takes the first twitches of autumn chill out of the air. Mary looks beautiful. She always does. But here on vacation, it's like being able to relax amplifies her beauty. We've been together for 2 years, a virtual lifetime for me considering my track record. She's game, savvy, clever. Whenever I look at her, and I do often, I just know we'll go the distance. I mean, most of the women I've dated leave the first time I'm laid up for more than a couple of days. What are you smiling at? Mary sidles over and pushes up against me. You, the future maybe, us. I pour her a whiskey and soda over ice, and she takes the tumbler from my hand. I see in her eyes that it's time for the talk. I put the decanter down next to the 8x10 framed glossy of me in costume shaking hands with a wrestler named Metal Mike Steele. I was signing headshots at MetroCon. Most of us, who aren't full in the league, do this to make extra money. I mean, since I only get paid by them when I'm on contract, plus a small annual retainer, a guy like me still needs to eat and pay the mortgage. As a contractor, I'm not really supposed to keep a real job on the side, as it makes things complicated for the regular league members who are gainfully employed outside of HQ. If I have to keep running off from, say, a car wash where I'm a detailer so that I can dress and show up at some intersection throwdown with Dr. Killdeath's robot army, then pretty soon my boss is going to put 2 and 2 together and I won't have a secret identity anymore. Once word gets out that, like, the big guy or one of the other league regulars might have a day job, then it'll be nuts for him and everyone he worked with out of costume. So there I was, sitting beside a couple of washed-up sci-fi actors on my left and a couple of cartoon voice people on my right. Those guys get all the traffic, by the way, so being seated next to them will bump up your take an easy 10%. And up walks Metal Mike Steele. The Metal Mike Steele. He's old now, but still has some of the shape anyone who knew wrestling would remember. Still sporting long blonde hair and a ponytail. Still making the porn stash look respectable. I'm awestruck. I mean, like, totally speechless. And if I didn't have a line of at least 100 people who could potentially pay me $20 for a photo and a signature in Sharpie ink, I'd have closed up shop and offered to buy the guy dinner, drinks, or whatever as long as we could sit and talk until I made an idiot of myself. Metal Mike blushes as I stand up to shake his hand. "Kid," he says, "I know you probably get told this all the time, but you're my absolute favorite hero working today. The other guys may have sizzle and flash, but you've got something way more important." "Sir," I say, "we have a lot in common, you and me." He smiles and places a thin scrapbook down on the table beside my dwindling stack of photos. "Agreed. I'll pay for a photo, too, but can you also sign this?" He opens the cover to reveal a book filled with news articles about me. "I started clipping a couple years ago when I happened to be on site when you faced off with Death's Head Cyborg." Instinctively, I rub my shoulder. Death's Head Cyborg shattered it with a thrown lamppost that nearly pushed me through the concrete front of a bank. It took a whole year to really recover from that one. I still have the titanium pins holding part of my scapula together. Amazon Princess took Death's Head Cyborg down with a special laser cannon developed in the League labs after 3 weeks of analyzing the fight footage and at least 20 interviews with me while I was still in traction. "After that, I felt like I needed to save whatever I'd find whenever you'd hit my news feeds." If I didn't have my mask on, he'd see the widest smile I've ever managed to make. I sign his scrapbook and sell him 2 pictures for the price of 1. I beg for a photo with him, which he obliges with a blush. "Man," he says, "I'm a nobody." I say, "Not to me. I watched every single wrestling match of yours that I could get my hands on when I was a kid. You always made it real. No costume, no gimmicks, no bullshit, just you and tights and whatever dude they put you up against." This time he rubs his shoulder. "Yep, every troop needs that guy, every one. Never been in an organization where you didn't have a face like mine helping to showcase the up-and-coming talent. Been a jobber my whole career. Contract fighter so I could change organizations when the storylines got too outlandish or some other issue dried up the work until I aged out. I still have a tape of your last match with Unlimited Wrestling International. 11 full minutes of the most amazing fight I've ever seen. You versus your old protege and tag team partner, the Creole Kid. Man, he was big." Mike chuckles. "I went off script for that one. The only time ever. Plot was for me to go down super fast, like 30 seconds in, so Creole could start his turn towards heel and grandstand for a few minutes. But this was the retirement match, so I dragged it on. And Creole played along at first, and then he started to get pissed. It didn't look like the usual sort of grapple and grunt. It wasn't. We had some shit to work out in front of people that night. Creole represented the new face of the UWI, all flash and bang. I showed him, them, you, that an old man with a good skill set could still hold his own. You let him pin you in the end, though. That was my job. Creole broke 2 of my ribs, dislocated my shoulder, and knocked out 3 teeth." He pauses and smirks. "Good times. Would you do it again?" "Probably." Someone snaps a photo and I give Metal Mike my email address. He sends me the picture and a thank you note 2 days after the convention. I write back, but he never replies. I learned later that a heart attack killed Metal Mike in his sleep, and no one found him in his one-bedroom apartment for like 5 weeks. He had no one. Mary offers the traditional opening. You can't keep doing this. Oh, come on. This is breaking the no work talk rule. We have the talk every 10 to 12 months. You're going to get killed and none of those assholes will even care and I'll be all alone. I try to smile away her worries. I'm not dead yet. Look. I flex and turn like a model to show off a fresh crisscross of staple scars across my right shoulder blade. Out of the hospital 3 days earlier than average. I always bounce back. But you won't one day. What then? What about me? She instinctively rubs her stomach, the international sign for what about when we make a baby. Come on, kitten. Let's not do this now. We're on vacation. I've got no contract work for 3 weeks at least. This is our time of year, you and me. This is when we enjoy the things that my jobs has earned us. Don't be moody and sad or I'll feel like I did it all for nothing. Mary wraps her arms around me. I feel her body sag a little as I squeeze. We kiss and I can still taste the whiskey on her lips. Why does your job have to be getting the fuck beaten out of you? I try to release her, but she holds on, pushing her curves over my bruises and scars. I whisper, what do you want me to do? The league won't hire me directly, and it's not like I have any other skills. There's no newspaper reporting to fall back on, and I'm not a rich orphan. They didn't even come to see you the last couple of times you were in the hospital. She kisses my cheek. Assholes. Yeah, assholes. I kiss her slightly pointy nose tip. I'll talk to them, honest. But for now, let's go to bed for a while. I'll show you there's still some fuck left in me after the last beating. Last year, the league fitted me with a special suit that records everything, every touch, every breath, every millimeter that every limb travels, everything. All linked up to communication satellites for easy transmission to HQ because time is short. The real-time information they get should, in theory, reduce my time playing punching bag so that as soon as they know who's best suited to most quickly neutralize a threat, that person shows up and does. Then we both go our separate ways. I get paid and usually fitted for a plaster of Paris tuxedo. They get press coverage, and everyone is happy. So yeah, I'm special even among the super special. I'm harder to kill than a bedbug infestation, all the while sporting the normal 206 bones that are abnormally 10 times as flexible and strong under muscles that abnormally hold 67.5 times the calcium, so I can contract them into an almost concrete hard armor, connected by ligaments and tendons just strong enough to hold all of me together. A guy like me who can do what I do, there's only one career, really. I started off freelancing, fighting gangbangers and stuff. I won't lie, it was fun for a while. But dodging bullets gets old fast, and spending every night out chasing criminals puts a crimp in a young guy's social life. Plus, it's not like that earns any cash. The first thing you learn when choosing superhero stuff as your vocation is that no matter how any of the crap starts, it always ends up with two people fist fighting. Could be invasion of future space Nazis. It's going to end up with you and Robo-Hitler duking it out probably right on Main Street. Weapons don't matter. Powers don't matter. It's fists. It's always been fists. It will always be fists. As soon as I could afford it, I started Kung Fu and Aikido classes. Learned how to swing a sword. Did parkour. Ran marathons. Taught myself to sew. Fabric first and then skin. I had some minor successes. I stopped a bank robbery. I rescued a kidnapped kid from a psychotic mother, stuff that made the news, but I didn't have a cohesive platform yet, so no trademarks and no notoriety. I got scouted by Amazon Princess, which almost never happens, after someone posted footage of me being run down by an armored car, then getting back up and snatching a motorcycle to give chase. The League gives a shit about bank robberies and angry divorces that lead to mothers stealing their kids and heading for the border. They care about mass shootings and rampant drug abuse. They care about serial killers and even people who run red lights. But those are problems so big, even the League can't solve them. Society has to deal with that crap. The crazy stuff, that's where the League focuses their attention instead. Irradiated monsters, super genius types, and the guys who are sort of negative versions of regular superheroes who just want to straight up fight an actual superhero right there in the middle of downtown and don't give a shit how many people get hurt before, during, or after. Mary takes my hand. She says, "Promise me this won't be forever." I lead her towards the small but comfortable bedroom. She stops at the door. "Promise," she says. "I can't." Mary whispers, "Don't lie to me." She pauses, then smiles coyly. Her lips are thin, and the upturn of them sets my heartbeat all funny. "Come to bed. Ignore all the shit out in the world. We're together now. Right now." She pushes me into the bedroom. Mary triggers the emergency beacon hidden in my belt buckle while I'm in the shower, which reminds me that even when you love someone enough to share with them what I do, you can't trust them, not ever. When I emerge, scarred and steamy, wrapped in a towel, the big guy is waiting in the cabin's living room. He squeezes his enormous red and blue festooned body into the colonial-style chair beside the fireplace. Mary hands him a vodka on the rocks. He smiles and places it on the coffee table. His eyes burn into mine. Not literally. I mean, the big guy's heat vision is no joke. He says, "This is a very strange emergency, Crimson Splash." I manage to choke out, "Got here quickly." I glance at Mary and then shake off my anger. The big guy shrugs. He says, "You know how it is. Hard to resist a damsel in distress." Mary says, "Don't talk about me like I'm beneath you." The big guy blushes, a genuine pair of red cheeks. I didn't mean... I was going to try and talk to you back at work anyway, I say. I've only ever talked to the big guy once, and even then it was in passing. We usually only cross paths when I'm being taken away on a gurney. Mary says, "Oh, drop the act, please. I'm not some starry-eyed idiot from downtown." Mary keeps her voice firm. "Mark isn't going out for the league anymore. Fight your own battles. Pay him what he's due so he never have to deal with you with the league again." "Mary, Mark provides an independent service to us. He can stop any time he likes." I consider interjecting but hold back. This is the confrontation I didn't want, but here it is. I'm sure the big guy wishes it were me in his place right now, just like always. The big guy says, "Mark is a contractor." I take in a deep breath before letting the words tumble out. "We need to talk about the suit." I don't bother to hide my nervousness. Most people are awestruck when he shows up. I mean, he's like a god. Mary, though, all 5 feet of her, clearly is not impressed. She snaps, "One more job and he's done, got it? No more of this bullshit. Pay him what he's worth so that then you can put on the goddamn data suit and deal with the crazies and monsters yourself." The big guy finds his strength, finally. "Or what?" He turns to me. "She knows an awful lot, Mark, an awful lot." Mary snaps, "I don't know, maybe he sells his services to someone else." Hey, let's not get all crazy now. Mary's just worked up because since you gave me the data suit, it's been more like I've been just a host for that. The big guy says, "What makes you think you haven't been? To be honest, Mark, the suit has given us better intelligence than you ever did." He pauses and stands. His cape catches a draft or something and manages to billow even though we're indoors. He looks majestic, even here in the middle of nowhere with no one but us looking on. Mary says, "Take that suit and stick it right up your ass." An uncomfortable hush falls over the cabin. The big guy drains his vodka, the first time I have ever seen him drink anything but milk straight from Kansas dairy cows, and places the tumbler on the coaster. "Mark, is this what you really want?" Mary glares at me, and it's worse than even the big guy's heat vision. I don't answer. The big guy shakes his head and walks towards the sliding glass doors to the patio. "I'll have someone put the necessary paperwork together," he says, and doesn't even look back before leaping up and disappearing into the clouds. "Mary, why did you do that?" "Oh, he's such an asshole. You shouldn't mess with my business. I don't walk into Memorial Library and tell you how to put away books." The anger rises quickly. "This is my goddamn job, Mary. You just quit my goddamn job for me." "I didn't quit anything. You don't understand. I don't even have a non-termination clause with them. I'm registered with the government because of my abilities. If I try to go out on my own, they'll arrest me. I might as well be a villain." "You don't need that job. It's a dummy job anyway." "What? I'm a dummy? Nice. Nice to know how you really feel after all this time. A dummy job?" Mary pours another drink and hands it to me. The implication of her actions starts to resonate in the cabin. "I'm selfish," she says quietly. "You're my hero. I shouldn't have to share you." "Well, you probably won't have to anymore. You broke the contract I had with him by triggering my beacon in a non-emergency. The big guy spending 20 minutes out here arguing with you about my place in the world could conceivably cause the death of thousands of people." Let's not be so overdramatic. The shallowness of Mary's understanding of my work is only just revealing itself. Perhaps I've been so caught up in my own stuff to realize that she bought into the image same as all the dopes who watch me get wailed on during the 6 o'clock news. Never mind. There'll be ample time to put this right now that I'm effectively unemployed, and we still have her salary from the library to live on, so it's not like we'll starve. I make a mental note to ask her what that salary actually is. I don't even try to sleep. The big windows carry all of the full moon's light against the back wall. It's so bright in the cabin that I could read. If I read, that is. I don't usually. Weird that I'd fall so in love with someone who's so in love with books. Mary snores just loud enough that even spooning and trying to think of other things, I'm left with insomnia. I abandon the bed and head to the living room. Night Shadow steps like a wraith from the darkness beside the fireplace. I jump. But don't scream. You'd think being around him, a guy would get used to his uncanny ability to appear out of the shadows like that, but you never really do. I wonder how long he waited there for me to come out of the bedroom. Outside, Mark. His voice is gruff, but surprisingly gentle. We have to talk. I wrap a plaid robe around my scars and bruises and little patches of normal as I follow him out to the stone patio. I pour a tall bourbon and water. Okay, I say, talk. The League needs you. The League doesn't need me. The big guy made that abundantly clear. He doesn't speak for all of us. The League isn't the only one recording data from the suit, and those folks aren't recording it because they give a shit about some monster or super scientist asshole. They're gathering data on him? The realization settles in slowly. Why? I pull hard from the glass. Not that I hadn't suspected or anything. Because what if, that's why. No one knows what he's really capable of, not even me. And knowing that kind of stuff is my whole stock in trade. Without data, we can't plan. Without a plan, we can't defend. Without defense, we can't survive. Do you understand? I sit in silence and consider asking him how long it takes to dress in all that armor and cowl, and then decide being flip isn't really a good strategy if I want to unscrew myself. So what? He knows who you are, where you live. He's been here, so he knows your secret hideout. If he decides to turn heel, then guess where he's going to start? Probably right here, because you're probably the only person on Earth who can go toe-to-toe with him for more than 2 seconds. Not because you're strong or smart or fast, but because you're flexible. Come back. Apologize. Say the woman doesn't speak for you. Break up with her permanently. It's safer for her in the long run anyway. Her name is Mary. She doesn't matter. The world is more important than you and her as a couple. You have a lot of balls coming here to tell me to dump my show up at League headquarters at the end of your vacation and make amends. I'll see to it that your contract is renewed indefinitely at double the contractor rate you receive now. That should settle any suggestion that the League isn't playing fair with you. I don't want to wear the suit anymore. I want it like it was. Interviews, debriefs, hospital visits, even if you never really were my friends. It was good to know someone from the League would come in and sit with me for a few hours every day. Perhaps we can modify our agreement, but the suit has to be part of it. What if I say no? Man with your talents doesn't have many avenues to employ them. Yeah, I heard that twice today. He sighs, and for a second time, he's as human as any other person I've ever met. Mark, we keep one contract in reserve. You really want out, then you get that contract. League takes no responsibility for your well-being during execution of or immediately following execution of that contract. You don't take any from me now. Touché. You've read the language. You know the gauntlet clause is the stupid way out. Take whatever the next job is without question for a full year's payout. You average what? 3 outings a year for us? That's barely enough to live on with food stamps and rent control. We know about the conventions too, and with 2 calls I can put a stop to that permanently. I only know 2 people who gauntlet claused out. One of them was killed in the middle of the street by the same crazy that almost took down the big guy. The other one lives in a permanent vegetative state after getting curb stomped by a giant robot. Why would you consider taking an almost positively guaranteed fatal ass-kicking for the chance to live a few months on life support until your money runs out and the hospital pulls the plug because you can't even hope to pay them? Who'll be there for you? Her? She won't. As soon as the gravy train goes off the track, she'll leave. They all do. Just women, so you're a sexist too? Night Shadow grunts. He pauses before adding, regular people, Mark. Gender doesn't matter. They all leave. As soon as a better prospect comes along, you watch. She'll drop you like a hot potato. He doesn't so much step as he seems to float off the deck and into the big field behind the cabin. He pushes a couple of buttons on his wrist, sticks his arm up and fires a grappling hook that just snatches the wing of a passing drone. 2 weeks, he says as the drone hoists him away and over the tree line. I pour another bourbon and go back inside. The night air is colder and lonelier than I can remember. The big guy stands in the League command room. His arms fold across his chest in insignia. His red cape and boots and belt and gloves fit in among the others here at League HQ. He flashes his hands over a tablet showing what we already know about the Green Machine. Not much, as it turns out. Something to do with radiation exposure and military tests. Dude's over 7 feet tall and covered in muzzles and making a beeline for the Biological Weapons Development Lab of Contract Global. Oh, the guy doesn't call himself the Green Machine. He doesn't call himself anything as far as anyone can tell. He's like a mad dog. So we name him. We name most of them, really. That takes some of their mystique away. The Green Machine is a monster, and the big guy is especially skittish around monsters. After a couple years back, when a giant super pissed off thing from space or something put him 6 feet under. Worst 3 months ever. Some of us, with similar body types, tried to pass ourselves off as him, keep the illusion up for the regular folks. I mean, who wants to think that someone like the big guy isn't looking out for them anymore? Or that, even worse, something big and nasty and full up with radioactive not-give-a-fuck-osterone might be out there still, and the big guy isn't around to stop it? I guess it doesn't matter. He didn't die. That's probably when Night Shadow started putting the idea of my suit together. If the big guy can't die, not really, well then what? The big guy says, I can probably take him. What's the ETA to the biolab? His voice wavers, but no one says anything. Getting beaten to death is a pretty impressive confidence breaker, so I don't blame him for hanging back. We all know I'm going in first. Night Shadow says, this rate 2 hours maybe. If the National Guard gets in front, they might slow him another 30 to 45 minutes. Ample time for us to plan. Amazon Princess adds, notify the media. Tell them we'll have a show for them about 2 miles east of the lab complex. Oh, and someone should call to warn the lab. I say, 2 miles is pretty close, don't you think? Lots of people around there, too. Don't worry, Night Shadow replies. We'll be monitoring the suit and we'll put together the right follow-up once we know what the Green Machine is capable of. Okay. I head off to dress for work as my alter ego, Crimson Splash. I slide into the data suit first. It's thin as spandex, so barely adds any weight to my costume choice. The device is powered by a pair of small lithium-ion batteries fitted into one of the pouches on my belt. Over the data suit goes the regular costume. Slightly padded spandex with a layer of nylon chainmail beneath. Red is the base color, with some white and yellow splashes across the front. The headpiece is meant to look like a skull cap and mask sporting millimeter-thick straps of titanium under the red cloth and vinyl. I don't have a face as Crimson Splash, just some pointed oval eye holes, opaque of course, and some hidden breathing holes between my nose and mouth. I fasten on a mid-back red cape, tug on my boots and gloves, then head out to the jet deck for my ride to run the gauntlet. I get a message en route from Night Shadow. You sure this is how you want to go? I don't reply. He knows the answer already. I close my eyes and think of Mary's smile. The Green Machine bellows and steps over me, knocking down 2 concrete bollards on his way. The walkway to the front of Contract Global is less than 10 yards from me to the entrance. I can see the faces of the office workers in the second floor pressed against the windows. They look like shadows behind the UV reflecting tint. Amazon Princess barks, You need to slow him down, Crimson Splash. I manage to speak between gasps. Jesus, guys, really? The fight is already 10 minutes old and I've spent most of it being bounced off of stuff like a highlight ball. Night Shadow says, Not enough data. I contemplate walking away and just letting the Green Machine smash the shit out of whatever it wants and let the League manage the fallout. I think about Mary in the cabin. I think about how far I've come and all the training I've had just so I can do this. Of Metal Mike fighting the Creole Kid for 11 straight minutes just so he could retire with dignity. Even if that dignity only mattered to him. Even if he died alone and forgotten. I get up. I always get back up. Can't let him get inside. Stagger to my feet, suck in one giant lungful of glorious cool air. I reach down into my utility belt and pull a little pair of explosive pepper grenades free. My legs are wobbly still, and I'm not fully oxygenated yet. I shout, Hey, ugly! But the Green Machine doesn't turn back, so I lob both grenades over his head. 2 quiet pops, and he's engulfed in a cloud of red-dyed aerosol capsicum. A bone-shaking roar erupts from inside the rapidly diffusing mist. He whirls around. Uh-oh. The Green Machine gets a hand on my skull and hoists me like a rag doll. His green-tinted eyes are blazing red and swollen almost shut. He's planning to face-plant me through the sidewalk, which, all things being equal, is about the most painful way in the world to die that I can imagine. I twist my legs around his monstrous thick arms and get my heel to the pressure point just below his bicep. He drops me and stares at his hand for a second like he doesn't understand why I'm not still in it. Momentum? Mine! Never underestimate the mileage you can get out of knowing pressure points. I spin down, kick out his legs, and am back up ready before he even bounces. 2 more pepper bombs and he stays down shrieking and flailing. The folks behind the window start to cheer and clap. Why haven't they run out the back door? Morons. The Green Machine rises slowly. You aren't going any further, buddy, I yell. He takes a step forward hesitatingly, like he can't believe I'm still standing there. I tense up, but I can't hold my muscles rock tight as my ribs are all bruised or cracked. I point right at him and growl, One more step, pal, and I'm putting you down. The Green Machine's eyes squint. He eases his head, which seems to be as big as a commercial-grade microwave oven, forward, but he doesn't step. Right here is where the gauntlet gets me. I go off script. You want some of this? Fine. No more of this masked-up bullshit. The League wants me dead, then the world's gonna watch you kill me for them. The real me, not some costume nobody. I don't stop undressing until I'm down to the data suit, my pants and shoes. The mask comes off last and my sweaty hair sticks to my bruised and throbbing head. Come get some! I swing and land 1 shot to his huge bulbous nose. The Green Machine counterpunches me so hard that for just 1 second, time goes inside out and I live all of my years again in super fast forward. I wake up once more, between pounds, and snatch a glimpse of a red and blue blur just before the Green Machine stops tenderizing my face with the pavement. The nurse says I'm lucky to be alive. She says that despite the best efforts of the green machine, I haven't more than some really deep bruises, a broken femur, 4 broken ribs, a fractured skull, fractured jaw, 3 missing teeth, 1 in the front, and a shattered eye socket. It's a miracle that there's more left of me than bone paste and bloodstains this time. She says the big guy himself brought me to the hospital, and that the league is footing the bill. She places a thick straw in my mouth so I can sip room temperature water. Later, she'll plastic spoon ice chips past my swollen lips. She changes the IV, adjusts the bed, takes out the dirty bedpan, and starts to clean me up. Used to be, bed baths made me blush and sweat and struggle to apologize through my gauze, but I guess enough exposure to embarrassment can make you immune to it. So, she asks, how are you feeling today? Today, I think. I mumble something through the gauze. She unwraps the bandages that cover half my face. Let's have a look at the swelling. I feel her blunt fingertips pushing not entirely gently against what I can just imagine is a giant purple bruise that seals my left eye closed. Not so bad. Her voice is quieter and I don't know, happier or something than the other voices in the blur. No morphine hits, but I bet you're aching just plenty, aren't you? A grunt is the best I can manage. The bed rises slowly until I'm able to see the nurse. She's younger than me, but not by much. Reddish hair under a white cap. She wears blue scrubs and a stethoscope. Her nose is pierced on the left side. Her eyebrows are drawn on in pencil. Her name tag reads Darcy. She and everyone else watching the battle outside the lab thought that monster killed me at least 3 times before I stopped pulling myself out of the rubble and putting myself between him and the Contract Global building. 3 times. That's a record for me. The nurse places a morphine dispenser in my hand, but I can't push it because my thumb is all entombed by plaster. Not that the opiates help anyway. The pain never goes all the way away anymore. Not really. And I've taken so much Vicodin I must have developed an immunity to the stuff. Darcy says she'll be back later. That she'll leave the TV on so I can hear human voices and not get too bored all alone in the room. Darcy says a lot of things that all merge together into a weird sort of stew of muddy voices, like I'm looking at an old photo, a real one on paper, where the people in the picture all moved during the half second the camera aperture was open just enough so you can't tell who's who, only that there were some people who stood stillish for a photo at some time in the indeterminate past. Mary visits every day for a week, then every other day, then once a week, then she doesn't come back. She tells me that she scored a head librarian gig in a different city halfway across the country, out of the blue, at a place that she doesn't even remember applying to work, but it's 3 times the pay and all of her moving expenses paid. Once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Can't pass it up. Night Shadow was right. I make a mental note to thank him when we cross paths again. Shouldn't be long. Shouldn't be long at all. Darcy shoots a few cc's of something awesome into the IV bag because suddenly I don't really care that I'm unexpectedly single, plastered into a hospital bed, and have to shit into a plastic bowl. Even some of the old pain subsides this time. Some. Darcy has a pretty smile. I make a mental note to tell her as soon as my brain can put the words together. I start to doze, drifting into that gray gloaming of ultra-strong narcotics. Darcy's voice follows me as an echo into the chemical void. We have some questions, Mark. I burble something like a laugh. Tell me, she says. Tell me what you know about the big guy.
We have with us today longtime New Hampshire writer, author of the piece you just heard, and host of the Bunch of Stuffcast podcast, where this episode will likely also be found, Jeff Derego. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey there. It's nice to meet both of you here in podcast town.
It's great to be here with you.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, tell us about your decades as a New Hampshire writer. How did you get started?
Okay, I got started as a New Hampshire writer in Massachusetts. How's that?
Me too.
As most good New Hampshire writers have started.
Exactly.
You start in another state, you move here. No, I started writing poetry and performing poetry when I was in my late teens, and it was all that great. Nobody loves me. I'm going to go hang myself off the pier type poetry that 19-year-olds tend to write. You can't get dates. But I learned a lot of discipline to be in front of the keyboard doing that, and parlayed that into starting to write short stories. So I started writing short stories before I went to college, and then I started writing them while I was in college. I wrote a book in college, which is the worst collection of English language words in some semblance of a sequence ever written, and will be buried in a lead-lined box with me when I'm finally interred. unopened to the world for fear of ending it. And then started finding a love for the short story form. Moved here to New Hampshire after college to marry a woman that I met in college who was a student with me. And that changed my locality to New Hampshire. Not that that's the most important part, but I wrote for a long, long time. The first real short story that I wrote, not for a class or something, was in 1990. The first story I sold for something that wasn't a copy of the magazine was in 2005. And in between all those years, I wrote constantly and still write constantly. So through the process of continuous typing.
Yeah, and that brings up something interesting that I want to ask about, because, you and I have something in common. Of course, I would say many, if not most, writers probably have this in common. But I mean, I have a personal connection with you on this because we once did work at the same company together. Yep. That's actually how I met you. And you, like me, and like I said, probably like most other writers, you have a non-writing related day job. And, so writing has to be something that you do, quote unquote, off to the side. Right. And you've been doing this for a really long time, and I'm interested in your perspective on that. As I've been experimenting for so many years at this myself, but I mean, do I have it down? I don't know.
Yeah, don't look at me as somebody who has it down by any stretch of the imagination. At this point in my life and career and stuff and success level, I've become that which I raged against in 2005 to 2010 or so. I've become sort of a hobby writer. Raising two kids who are now teenagers. One actually works at the same place you do, my son Ian. And,
really?
Yeah, he works in the Knock. And
my
nice.
Daughter, I didn't know that.
Yep. And my daughter, who's now a sophomore in high school, they don't need quite as much, sort of day-to-day parenting. At least I don't think they do, as they did before. You still there? Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. My computer went to sleep. This doesn't keep the computer going. So, oops.
I see. I got you.
I'll just remember to shake my mouse around every couple minutes.
Yeah.
So with working full time and managing a house full time and all that sort of stuff full time, it's hard to find the time to really sit down and just grind out a story. I've always done work to sort of make the bills, and I've written as a way of spending time by myself and decompressing and all that sort of thing. And I've fallen back into that model now. So my writing nights are like Monday night if I don't have a soccer game, Wednesday night if I don't have a soccer game, alternating Saturdays and Sundays for the afternoon, for a few hours in the afternoon. And that's really all I can manage at the moment. So like, for example, the story that we just listened to, Jobber, that took me a long time to write. Normally I could smash out 5,000 to 6,000 words in about 40 hours of dedicated writing. But it took 40 hours or so to write that story. It just was spread out over a year and a half.
Yep.
So
yeah, no, I totally. So it sounds like, I mean, your method is very similar to mine. Then, yeah, it's here and there. When there's a night that I can dedicate to it, and it works out to be maybe once or twice a week.
Yep.
I can spend time doing stuff like that, and the other thing for me too is that with this magazine, Monadnock Underground, and the podcast associated with it, a lot of times that will, it's a trade-off, right? Whether I have the writing night or the, putting stuff together for the publication night, right? Because I don't really have extra free nights because of that. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I understand that. I understand that completely. Yes. It is a struggle. It's a weird calculus, right? Like I have so many projects that are in production at the moment, right? Any writer has a myriad of things that they work on.
Yes. And
it's because we're not dedicating sort of Stephen King head down, big pile of cocaine, quality cocaine to just blast out the Stand in, 78 days. Right. We don't have that. Right. We don't have the luxury of that because we have to work and eat and do laundry and, make sure the children aren't shooting guns at the neighbors or whatever.
Exactly.
So you lose the thread of where you were in any given story. It's what? So for me, a lot of getting back in and banging out word count. The first hour I have to spend reading the last 30 pages of what I wrote. What? What the hell was I writing about when I started this story? Right? Where am I going with this?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do have to say too, kudos to you as well, because personally for this sci-fi collection, I wrote a piece of fiction, and I always I think of myself as a fiction writer, but I so infrequently actually write fiction. Most of my stuff is, essays and commentary and things like that. And that stuff, honestly, I can just blast right out, right? It's not, it just kind of, it's what I think, right? So I just throw it out there. But tackling this fiction story, my first one in several years, it is like twice as hard, at least. It's like twice as much effort for half as much output, I would say. It's very difficult.
Yeah, well, you have to it's this weird kind of strange method acting, right? So you have to sort of put yourself in the point of view of the point of view character. You have to put yourself into that character I don't know I haven't seen your story, so I don't know if it's in third person.
There's a lot of characters in it, and I do have to put myself in a lot of different points of view. Yeah, you're right.
And you've got to map all of these interactions out and make sure that you have continuity between what this person says and what that person says, and what this person does and what that person does, even though they may not occupy the same space and time in the story. Like, that takes a ton of work. Plus, realizing that you don't want to write, he saw the thing, he picked up the thing and put it over there. Hey, he said, that thing is cool. Really? She said, I like things. Really? Things are great. Like, I've edited people's work that's like that. And all I want to do is rip my eyeballs out and throw them, because they're in such a hurry to get the point moving along. Like, they're writing like the Avengers movie. Like, I don't give a shit about nuance or sentence structure or whatever. Just get me to the next thing that happens, like the big fight scene or whatever. Meanwhile, I'm saying, these are the most boring sentences I've ever read in my entire life. And you don't understand how direct objects work. And clearly you've never seen a prepositional phrase at the end of a sentence. You always start sentences with a Yoda. So, you put the time into the craft and the story comes kind of later, or you put the time into learning to tell the story and the craft comes later. I don't know what's the right way, but what you end up doing is learning that slowing down and you find a balance between taking time to make sure the story is moving forward. I'm talking with my hands as I do this, so if you hear this weird slippy sliding noise, that's my hands on my keyboard or on the keyboard thing in front of me. Is that you
I
slow
actually
down.
whacked the microphone a second ago doing the same thing, so I get it.
So there you go. I don't feel so bad. So it must be the D's in our last name, the DiLoretto and the DiRigo.
I think so.
We talk with our hands because of that.
Yep.
But what happens is you find that balance between what you'll accept as good enough writing, at least in the first draft, and what's going to move the story forward. Rather than spending 7 hours farting around with one sentence, you'll write 150 sentences, and then the next day you'll go cut 139 of them.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. I'm in the middle, in the weeds of this fiction piece, and not only do I have to reread it every time I sit down, but then I reread it and I delete more than half of what I just wrote, and so it's just taking forever to move forward.
And that's unless you have dedicated time with no distractions, and distractions are. Some people say I have to write in complete silence, or I have to write with music going, or I have to write with the TV on in the background, or whatever. I mean distractions that take you away from your work. Somebody asks you a question, what? I've looked at my kids and they might have said to me Dad, the house is on fire. Do you want to go out the back door where it's safe? And I'd be like, what? I got to finish this. Just chill.
Hold on.
Open the window. There's smoky in here, But so if you can get away from distractions and focus, then you spend that less time going back and refreshing your memory of whatever the hell it was you were trying to say when you last looked at the story, which in some cases for me might be a year ago, or 6 months ago, or 2 months ago, or 3 weeks ago, or last weekend, because I can't remember what I was doing, because this is only one of 8 different things that I have in process that I might feel like working on, one of the rock and roll stories. I have a book of rock and roll stories, right? A book of rock and roll stories. I might want to work on that, or I might want to work on this other big long thing that I've been doing that's 65,000 words now.
Nice.
Or whatever, or I've got people hounding me for more Union Due stories. So I'm trying to pull a volume of those together and finish this last story that finally ends all these stories, and I can put it out there. So it when I sit down, it's geez, the first 10 minutes is what the hell do I want to write about today, and then it's what's familiarized with myself with what I've done in the last 30 pages, so I don't just rewrite the last 30 pages again, which has happened. And then how do I make the time to make this happen? And then all of a sudden somebody needs what's for dinner, Dad? What? The dog needs to go out. Oh, go away. Why do we even have a dog? And and or whatever, because like you end up dedicating your time to that other stuff, and it slows the process right to a crawl. When I had my greatest sustained success as a writer was between 2008 and about 2011. And what's important about 2008 to 2011, Chris? Economically in the United States.
Oh, the financial collapse.
Oh, yeah, I was unemployed. So I was collecting unemployment.
Oh, yeah.
So I was pretty much being paid to write stories and ostensibly look for work, which no one had at the time. So I would put in 40 hours a week, every single week, and just write story after story after story after. I had a friendly editor that would buy almost anything that I wrote. So I became like L. Ron Hubbard. Like,
nice.
You need a cowboy story? Fuck it. Cowboy story's coming right up. What do you want? Okay, coming right up. 40 hours later, there's 5,000 words. And I could make that happen. And then I went back to work, and it's like, you want it when? I don't know, maybe April?
Yeah, exactly.
So you become more picky and choosy about what you're able to put out and stuff. So
that's the tricky thing, man. Yeah, and I had a similar situation back in 2013. I lost my job, and I didn't work full time again until I started at Single Digits, like not quite a year later, but almost. And yeah, every night I had, and we had a new baby at the time, or at least for part of that time. Or Kelly was pregnant for some of it too, so it wasn't like I could necessarily do it all the time. But I had my nights, and I didn't have to wake up necessarily first thing in the morning. And boy, was I productive then.
Right, I wrote a whole book about Japanese war atrocities. A novel of about the rape of Nanking, ostensibly, during that first formative year and a half that my daughter was born, because my daughter was a screamer. Because we listened to the pediatricians who said, your daughter, this is in the first week of her being out of my wife's uterus, right, out of the womb, and it's like, she doesn't eat every 2 hours. You should make sure she eats every 2 hours, which we took to mean if she's asleep, wake her up, and make her eat. And whoever played that practical joke on us, I hope they die a horrible, slow death, surrounded by screaming babies. And we did that.
Seriously,
So
that was cool.
So from the second week that my daughter was alive, she had two settings: shrieking as if she was covered in fire ants and scorpions, or asleep. And she only slept for 2 hours at a time. So she would sleep in bed with my wife Cindy, and I would just stay up. And by then I was so mentally damaged from the stress of the screaming monster that my child had become. I had found myself buried in reading about Japanese war atrocities, and I have a degree in history, and I'd never understood the war, the Sino-Japanese war. I didn't know anything about it. And I found myself just submerged in all this information. Most people don't, yes. And it pissed me off that I didn't know.
Yep.
So I couldn't understand the rationale of how people ended up being able to commit such horrifying acts on other human beings, and how you figure that shit out, for lack of a better description. I can swear on this podcast, right?
You can swear on this podcast.
Damn, all right.
Yes.
How you figure that shit out is you write a story where that shit happens. Because as a fiction writer, you have to sort of marinate yourself in that character. You have to think about what the character thinks about, the way the character thinks about them. Based on all the research I've done on what Japanese soldiers were like, that's what I did. So I wrote this horrifying, terrible, long book about a Japanese soldier who goes off and participates in the rape of Nanking as a way of getting away from my daughter's horrifying screams. That's the short version of what I just told you over the long version. So,
well, so what happened to the book?
It's still here. it's okay. So publishing is a kind of a funny place to be right now. There's a lot of identity built into who writes what and why. And I don't know that it's necessarily, this is going to sound strange coming from someone like me, and you know me a little bit, but it doesn't feel like it's my place to tell this story. That was something I did sort of with the expectation that I would be able to sell it at some point, hopefully. But it feels like it's not my story to tell, if that makes any sense. Because my understanding of this is academic only, and everything else is made up bullshit of whole cloth. And I don't know that does it justice to the culture of the Chinese or the culture of the Japanese or those caught in between, for the sake of me trying to figure out why someone would commit a war atrocity. So it's probably better left buried on my hard drive until long after I'm dead, and somebody goes like, "Oh, this is pretty good. This would have made $1 billion if it was published when Mr. Derego was alive. Instead, he died a pauper."
Yeah.
But
I see what you're saying, though. That it definitely served a purpose for you.
Yeah.
But that's good on you, I guess, for thinking about the implications of releasing it broadly.
Yeah, I mean, I pitched it. I pitched it to lit agents and I pitched it to editors and stuff. And again, back in 2005, 2007 and stuff, the identity of the writer was less of an issue, and it seems to be more of an issue now. So it's probably best that I never throw anything away, but I just let it sit for now until later. It's been through the edit process a couple of times, and it still has some really rough components that need to be fixed. And I don't know. At some point, I'll probably do something with it again. Whenever I go back to look at it, I find myself reading it all the way through and making changes to like, oh, that should be a comma, or oh, that's probably better with a semicolon. But I don't make any structural changes to the piece because I think the piece stands relatively well. It's just, I don't know. It feels funny to write it. It would be like me writing it must have been like what H.G. Wells felt when he wrote like the first of the New Women novels. Like, I'm sure he thought like, it's very strange for me to be writing in the point of view of a 17-year-old girl who wants to dress like Peter Pan, and all of a sudden, there he is. He's got a whole bunch of these books out. So, I don't know.
I know what you mean. It's bold,
Yep.
You gotta, you gotta understand what you're doing when you do something like that,
Yes. Yep. And, there's an agenda to it. Like, there's definitely for a type of story like that, you're effectively writing an anti-hero, which is hard to do. It's hard to pull off. Just from the creative aspect of it, it's difficult to write a character that you want the audience to identify with, who's going to go out and do horrible, horrible things. That's like a betrayal of the audience's trust. Some writers can get away with it. Nabokov got away with it in Lolita, depending on who you talk to. I personally think he did. Burgess got away with it in A Clockwork Orange. But I haven't read many other books where the main character was reprehensible by circumstance, where I felt like the book didn't lie to me up to the point where that happens.
I'm with you. Yeah.
I don't know, what was the original question? As Zoe will tell you from before you arrived on scene to talk about this, I said I could drag us all over the place, and I don't mean to do that.
Which is great. That's what makes a great episode. Yeah.
But tell us about some of your fiction collections that have seen the light of day.
Sure. So I got fortunate right at the very birth of podcasting. I was able to landed a query letter, as rare as those things are now, with an editor of named Steve Ely, who had just put out the 22nd or 23rd episode, excuse me, of a science fiction podcast that I'd never heard of called Escape Pod. And they paid $25 for a story, and I wrote him a letter and I said, hey, I've written a couple of superhero stories that might fit your podcast. If you're interested, I'd like to send them along. They're interlinked thematically, but not by character or plot. And if you're interested, I'd like to send him along. And he wrote back and he said, yeah, that sounds great. And I said, fantastic. So the first short story that I wrote in 1990, a story called Union Dues, I reworked into a story called Iron Bars and the Glass Jaw from a typewritten draft into an RTF file. And then I sent that one, and I sent the other two stories in that series that I had written. And he wrote back and he's like, I'm going to buy the first one and the third one. And if you rewrite the second one, I'll also buy the second one. I'm like, okay.
Nice. Yep.
And he said, you can keep sending these to me. And as long as they're standalone stories, I'm happy to try and to give them a look, like a priority look. I said, okay. So I was convinced that he would never put out the first one because it's literally a conversation. The whole story takes place in a single jail cell between this super strong guy who's waiting to be picked up and the sheriff who's arrested him because he killed someone. And it's just a conversation between these two guys. And that story, when it was published, became the most popular story at this podcast for the whole year. It got downloaded like 1 million times.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yep. So the other stories that came out in the intervening months were also super popular. They got downloaded like 1 million times collectively. And then I sold a shitload more of them, as well as some other science fiction stories to that market. And I reached out and I sold some zombie stories to some other markets and stuff. And ultimately what happened was I met a publisher through some work that I used to do, writing and preparing a commentary track for a podcast called The Writing Show by Paula B. And that editor and I struck up a conversation, and she said, I'd like to take a look at your stories. And I said, all right. So she ended up buying 8 of them as a set, and I wrote 2 brand new stories for her, and she put a collection out called Escape Clause. That was from ENC Press and came out in 2011 or so. And then I have put out a book of short stories called Fleas, which is a non-science fiction, non-genre. It's 10 interlinked stories set in the same weekend in a flea market, like the flea market that was here in Derry that got raided for selling counterfeit purses. Set in that place. Yep. And it tells 10 different stories inside of that place within the space of one weekend. And I've sold almost, I think, 11 copies of that book since 2014 when it came out. And
wow,
yes, it's a bestseller. It's like number 1,999,486 and a half, and Amazon's list of books put out by people that contain words. It's terrible. It doesn't sell for shit. But again, it's the best writing I've done. I love it to pieces, and I joke about it, but like, I've had one person read it, my brother, and he called me. He's like, this is a great book. Somebody should make this into a TV show. And I said, yeah, I agree. He's like, who do you know? Like, I don't know anybody that makes TV shows. I live in New Hampshire, what am I going to find the guys from Chronicle? Look, I know you like to report on the Dighton Rock in Massachusetts and what used to be the Old Man of the Mountain for the 14th time this year. But how about you take a chance on this story about flea markets, I'm probably not going to fly.
So I just bought a copy of it because I was like looking up your work and I thought it sounded really intriguing. I actually knew some people who did that kind of stuff.
Oh, nice.
So I started skimming it, and I haven't read enough to comment or give you a review, but I'd have to tell you I was trying to skim it and I just kept getting sucked in. So maybe 2 people will have read it.
See that? That'd be great. And then if you ask me whether or not I think it should be a show, yes. And if you ask me if I know anybody who makes TV shows, no. But I hope you enjoy it, and if you do enjoy it, like, by all means, let me know what you think.
Yeah,
it was really fun to write, and the story of how that book came to be. My daughter was still in a stroller, so this was, again, I was in that 2008-2009 period. Right, Meg was born in 2005, so maybe 2007 or so. So I was still working. And that was when that Derry flea market was at the height of its insanity. So they the owner of the flea market used to pay the Derry police time and a half out of his own pocket so that 2 police officers could run traffic. Because 50 million people would show up for this stupid thing to buy vinyl dipped handbags with the Coach logo glued onto them. It was insane. I'm not even kidding, right? Am I kidding?
No, I believe it. Yeah.
And I went there with my wife and my kids, and we walked around, and it was like shoulder to shoulder people, 1 million Chinese people who were the ones who were selling the bags, who were pushing all of the other business of the flea market to the fringes of the flea market. And by the time I worked my way all the way through back to where my car was to leave, I had the germ of every single story in that book memorized. All I had to do was come home and type it.
Wow.
And I started typing it the next day. And for the next, I don't know, I guess 2.5 years, it took me to bang out all 10 of those stories. And at the time I was running a writer's group into the ground, but I was running a writer's group out of my house. And those stories were like put through the writer's group time and time again until I had them to where I liked them. And then once all 10 of them were done, I contacted the person who did the writing show as a paid editor who edited it for me into the manuscript minus the 2 typos that are in there that you see today. Those were put in by me. And I put it out with great fanfare, and I think I handed out more books just to, hey, I wrote a book. Hey, I wrote a book. Hey, I wrote a book than I ever sold. But yeah, it's a lot of fun to write, and the characters were really, really interesting, and it was really fun to do. So I love short stories, and I like short stories that have a tie, whether it's timing, a character, or an event that cascades from one story to the other, so that you can hang different takes on this story together to make a bigger work. And it makes it, for me at least, it makes it more rereadable. I don't know if you've ever read the Xana Henderson People stories, but those stories are like that too. So that's stories like the people were space aliens or something who crash landed on Earth, and now their kids are spread out all over the world, and they realize they have like these powers. And slowly but surely, they come to the realization that they're all from outer space. But every story is individualized, and they're getting closer and closer together. Eventually, characters meet from one story to the next, but each story is a standalone story because Xana Henderson sold them all out to like Asimov's and Analog and the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction and Argosy and all these other magazines in the 50s and 60s.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I'm gonna have to get a copy of this too.
Yeah, it's totally worth checking out.
So I think I see at the bottom of the screen lurking a special unannounced guest.
Is that Dan Szczesny?
Hey, man.
Oh my goodness,
Chris.
good God.
Chris told me to stop by and sit here and silently judge you.
And judge you shall. Judge me, you shall. I was just saying that I ran a writers group into the ground in my house. Dan was my co-pilot in that adventure.
Sure.
I'll have you know. Well, spaghetti and writing, which
the writing group it was almost designed to not work.
Yeah, and for some reason we made it work for 2 years.
Yeah, and we tried so hard to get rid of people, and some hung on till the end, and some hate us now and don't talk to us, and so it was kind of successful.
How did it finally end?
Okay, so let me tell you the quick story. I don't know that Dan can tell you there's no such thing as a quick story with me, but I'll tell you the quick story of how this came to be.
Remember judging you.
Yes, judging me. At the time, Dan was coming to my house like every Thursday night or so for dinner and to watch movies, because I used to write movie reviews for a website called Horror View. So I would get a sheaf of DVDs every couple of weeks of shitty, terrible movies, and we would watch them, and I would write these exhaustive 20,000-word monstrous reviews of them.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, it was super fun. But by the way, writing tip for you kids out there, if you want to understand how 3-act structure works, summarize shitty movies for a website. Oh, yeah. Because you learn it there. I'm not even kidding. That's definitely a thing that you can try. So, anyway, he's coming to my house every Thursday, and I had this is such a convoluted story. I had hosted a poetry slam. I don't like slam poetry, but I liked honorarias of $35 at the time. So I hosted a slam event at the library. I got yelled at by some people from Manchester who were mean to me because I don't know what a poetry slam is and they can go fuck themselves. And anyway, there was a lady there named Margaret. Yeah. She's an elderly woman who writes fantastic poetry. Mm-hmm. And she had kept in touch with me via email. So I got interviewed when I think the Escape Clause book was coming out. It was like around 2010, 2011. My wife had cancer at the time. Was still alive. And so it must have been 2011 or so. And I was interviewed in the Derry News. So Margaret and her friend saw Margaret and said, "Hey, did you see this guy in Derry? He's a writer, and he's got a book out. We should see if he wants to join our writers group in Salem." And Margaret says, "Oh, I know him. I'll just give him a call." So she gave me a call and she's like, "Hey, we'd like you to come and join our writers group in Salem." I said, "For what?" She goes, "To be a member." I was like, "I don't want to be a member of any group that would have someone like me as a member, putting on my best Groucho Marx." So I said, "I tell you what, on Thursday nights, I make spaghetti and I bake bread in my house. If you want to come and talk to me about this writers group of yours, you can come talk to me and I'll tell you what I think I might be able to do to help you out." And they said, "Oh, okay." So the next Thursday, their entire writers group showed up for dinner at my house. And I was like, I'm making bread in my kitchen and there's like 7 people in my kitchen. My kitchen is I swear to God, is 13 square feet. It's so small. It's so small it would be closed off because of COVID regulations, right?
Yeah.
I'm making bread and I'm listening to them and they're like, we want you to be in the group. And I'm like, I don't want to be in your writers group. I don't want to be in any writers group because writers groups suck. And they're like, but we really think that you could bring some energy to the group. And I was like, I don't want to go meet in Salem and talk to you guys once every month and hear you read your shitty stories to me. Like, I don't want to do that. And I said, the only way I will ever be in a writer's group is if you follow I'll have to make the rules. And they said, fine, make them. And I was like, really? And I said, all right, I still have them. I should send them to you. But it was like, they were super. I wrote them and I was like, no one in their right mind would ever do this.
So Jeff immediately set off to write rules to a writers group that no one would want to come to.
No one would want to come to. A 5,000 word minimum limit every 2 weeks. No, not even. Dan, am I kidding?
No, you're not kidding. It was like the hardest. It was like going to like Princeton. It was like taking classes.
Right, 5,000 words every 2 weeks.
It was
a
so
cascading
hard.
submission. A cascading submission schedule that I built so that nobody had to. We weren't all reading like 7 stories in the space of 2 days. So
Right.
everybody would get a submission date. So your story had to be at least 2 weeks out from the submission date. You had to fill out a submission summary form. No one was allowed to read their work at the meetings. We sat down over dinner, right? And we talked about the stories that we had read, and we just handed off critiqued copies to one another.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah,
And it was fucking brutal.
It was really brutal.
Yeah.
It was brutal.
I loved it because it meant that I was writing every week, but
Right.
like, there's like a lot of these, I shouldn't say little old ladies, but most of them were little old ladies. A lot of these little old ladies were like writing in their diaries or writing about, poems about their cats. And Jeff was like, nope, Jeff,
not gonna work.
You're not going to work. You didn't meet the poetry cat. Or like he'd tear their cat poem apart and they'd be like, oh my God.
This cat poem should be put to sleep just like your kitty.
It was hilarious.
Here's the thing, though. Once we shook out the bullshit artists,
Yeah.
and we shook out the bullshit artists until there were 4 of us left. The 4 of us landed story after story after story after story.
Yeah.
One of us is in Boston right now writing an art magazine. Right? That's CM Colby.
That's CM, yeah.
Margaret Bobolette King landed short stories in 2 of the New Hampshire anthologies that went through our process.
Yeah.
And she's won a couple of pushcart prizes for poetry.
Yeah.
Dan, you've seen Dan's output.
Yep.
And me.
Wow.
I've landed stuff in 3 of the New Hampshire anthologies, as well as, the podcast and other stuff. But that hard work paid off.
Yeah.
And everything like that can work for a really good time for a long time until, and I'm going to put this out there, kids, for you. The day that the man who makes the fucking spaghetti drinks 2 bottles of wine while he's making spaghetti, courtesy of Peggy Nolan, and gets shit-faced and passes out at the table and hasn't written anything. And that was the last time we met as a group. That was what I called the night that Orson Welles, Paul Masson,
Paul Masson.
that was Orson Welles was like at the table like, French champagne.
Theme here at Monadnock Underground.
I can remember sitting at my table and side-eyeing Dan, who is shaking his head slowly as he's eating. And I'm trying to tell somebody who hasn't turned in a complete story. You haven't turned in a complete story. And this is what comes out of my mouth. Your fucking writing isn't good. And that was pretty much the end of the spaghetti and writing route. So,
yeah, more or less. That's pretty accurate.
more or less, right? And I think I was like, goodbye from my couch as my kids were ushering the people out because I was incapable of moving at that point.
It was like the end of a Victorian novel.
It was definitely
like Meg was like fanning Jeff, like come on, Papa, come to bed, Papa.
Yes, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna sleep on the floor right here.
And Ian is like, your coats. Look. Don't
The old code, sir.
tell no one what happened here today.
Master Wild is a bit under the weather. Just leave him on the carpet. So yeah, it was pretty funny, and that was the end. No one wanted to get together and have writers group meetings after that, which is fine because I didn't want to have many more anyway.
Yeah, but I still came over for spaghetti though.
Yes, Dan still came over for spaghetti, but I mean, that pace is you just can't keep it up. Margaret could keep it up because she's retired.
Yeah.
Yep.
CM could keep it up because she was she was getting ready to go start school in Emerson.
Yeah.
She was a high school kid, so she didn't have a full-time job. And then Dan had the Hippo and other stuff, and I had, at the time, I was working for single digits.
Yeah.
Or TRA. I can't remember
wow.
if it was before. And,
so I knew you then.
Yeah. So, and that was when it all went to.
Yeah,
as
but
they say.
you got to admit though, even when it wasn't our writing group, like the writing group at the Dairy Community Center, remember that one? We blew that one up too.
Yeah, we did the same thing there, except we didn't have the rules. We just went in and we're like, we met once a month, not every 2 weeks. We met once a month, and every time Dan and I went, we brought 5,000 new words,
Right.
and we just destroyed anybody who brought less than that or stuff that wasn't new. And we were terrible snarky assholes. It was great.
we really were, and there's a lot of them too. There was like a dozen of them, and remember, I forgot what her name was. Do you remember? Not Janet, the other one, who was writing. She literally was writing for like a diary for Cat Fancy, and she was.
Oh my God! She would bring in a newsletter.
Cats, but yeah, newsletter. She was writing a newsletter. It was so bad, and Jeff would just be like, "All right, I'm going to stop you right there."
I don't want to hear about your insurance newsletter anymore. Like, if you don't know how to put a sentence together for a newsletter, you're in the wrong place.
And these poor people are like,
I just wanted help with my. I just wanted some help with my propositions. Yeah, well, go away.
Right.
Here's some 2 propositions for you.
And it wasn't even our writing group. And then like after a couple of months, like we would just show up and nobody else would be there.
We changed the writers group without us, I'm sure.
Yeah. So
I'm not going anymore. Those 2 assholes are going to tear me apart.
Exactly.
Right. It was really funny.
What it was. Yeah.
It was really funny.
Good times.
Good times. Well, you know what comes out of that, right? Is you make lifelong friends. Like Dan and I have been friends since 2000, I think.
Yeah, since 2000.
Right.
And
we met the writers group.
I walked into said writers group. And the first month I moved down to Derry. I don't know how long Jeff had been part of that writing group.
I've only been part of it for one meeting before you came in.
Yeah. And so I moved up here and I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any friends. I didn't know anything. And then I don't even know where I saw it, like in the newspaper or someplace. Where there was a writers group meeting. It was like a block away from where I was living at the time. So to me, I was like, oh, writers group, I better have material, So I had like 10,000 word story, which I all polished and edited. And I just walked in there and then Jeff was there. Yeah, and there's a lot of other people at that first meeting, if I recall.
They didn't stay around.
They did not stay around. And Jeff and I just hit it off right away. I think because we were such asshole jerks and we're so critical. I was critical, and like Jeff read his story. I was like, oh, that's real. I'm not going to be thable of that. That's really good.
Yeah, and same thing with Dan. I was like,
mine, and then so we were like from across the table. We were like, oh, wow,
all right. Respect, sir.
We're a team.
Well done.
We didn't even know each other, but we were like, we're going to destroy everyone else in this room.
One of us is Batman, the other is Robin. Right. Who is unknown yet, but that is the pairing. Yeah.
So that's how we met. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that, going back to what you said earlier, Jeff, about, being able to sustain that kind of level of pace. That's what I was thinking as you were telling the story. But I was also thinking, though, this sounds like something that I would sign up for, with those rules and everything like that. I can see why, again, like you said, once you kind of like whittled away at, those who weren't as serious, that kind of pressure cooker, produce such good results.
Right. Yeah. Right. We had a 75% success rate for whatever we submitted. And one of the rules that we had was you had to submit 2 times a year to 2 different markets, and they had to be paying markets.
Yeah.
And you couldn't submit the same story twice.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. We weren't fucking around. Like we were like getting stuff ready. Like we were doing this to do this, Yeah. And
it's like writing special forces training or something.
Yep. Yep. And the critiques that we did were line edits and then we would do a summary sheet. And the summary sheet was probably the most important thing. And that was usually, I don't know, Dan, what were ours? 2,000 or 3,000 words of summary sheets on people's stuff?
No, it was very long. And I would do it longhand too. Like on Jeff's, I'd get to the end and I'd staple a couple of blank pages to the end of his story so I could write more.
Yep.
And it was good. I mean, it was, I got to the point where I always respected, Jeff's opinion, but, I remember, do you remember the Monkey Boy story, Jeff?
Yes.
Remember the
I do.
So, I think it was the only time. I mean, there was times when Jeff critiqued my stories, but that was the only time where he was just just throw this in the fucking garbage right now.
The story's not good.
This
not
is
a good
the
story,
worst
Dan.
thing I've ever. It's like one of those things where you get a book and you get 100 reviews and 99 of them are 5 stars, but it's that 1-star review that you just can't let go.
I think it's something like, go find the fucking high school freshman that wrote this for you and get your $10 back, or something like that.
It was brutal. It was just I barely remember the compliments, but I remember that one. Yeah.
It was bad. Yeah. Remember, my favorite of all the stories that we read, and it was the only one that I went to bat for because it was so fucking bizarre, was Grapey Strudel, and that was one of CM stories. CM stories, and you had the best. I remember chatting with you, did you read Grapey Strudel? And you're like, yeah. What the fuck do you think Grapey Strudel is? And he said, I think it's probably the name of her bong. And I shat myself laughing. It was so funny.
The funny part of that meeting was that we basically just forgot everybody else was there, and Jeff just took the side of the story, and I took the anti-story.
Yeah,
and for half an hour, him and I just debated,
just argued. It was fantastic.
Whether that story was good or not, with the actual author sitting right there at the table listening to us. She was 18 or something at the time.
Yeah, It was a piece of writing she had done for a class in high school that she had brought in. We'd let that sneak in under the rug. I think she'd only graduated from high school 3 months before. Because we had a rule with no trunk stories. Everything had to be new. If you show us something old, we're not going to read it.
Yeah.
So we let that one go, and there was enough weirdness in it that I thought it could have been turned into something good. And Dan was like, "Nah, you're better off writing something else."
Yeah.
And that was it. It was like Rock'em Sock'em Robots and spaghetti.
Fun.
It was super fun.
Yeah.
Well, what a benefit for an 18-year-old, though, that the two of you took it so seriously that you would debate about it for a half an hour.
Yep, at least a half an hour.
Awesome.
And she's a tough kid. She's serious about her work, and she was mature for her age.
Yep.
Well beyond her years.
And her hard work has totally paid off. She's the one she writes for a bunch of art magazines in Boston. Yeah. And travel magazines and stuff. She's living the dream. She's
our greatest success.
Our greatest success. Yes, she's the one that we made. She's our Frankenstein's monster. Yes. Yep.
You guys in any writing groups now?
No, we're not allowed in those. No, they have our picture up at the librray. If these people ask about your writing group, make the aliases of Fef Joe Rigo and Shan Shan. They are poison.
Yeah. I don't think I could survive for 10 minutes in a writing group anymore. That's the past. Although it might be fun, it might be fun to just to be writing group mercenaries, to just go from town to town and destroy writing groups.
Well, that's kind of what I'm imagining, is that you guys are dormant right now, waiting for the day, but you never know. And all the people in all the writing groups, every time they meet, they're like, "Is this the day?
Is this the one?
Is this the one? Right? Oh my God, it's all the regulars here. Oh, phew. I can share my story about the guy who drives his convertible off a cliff with his wife, with the poorly described marital problems and something to do with sandwiches. This is a perfect day for that story because they're not here. Whereas if they had been there, and Dan knows that's a reference to one of the stories that came through our group initially, that we cut it apart so bad it looked like it had been used for a samurai sword tamagashiri practice. That guy didn't come back.
That's so mean. Well, at least we got a couple out of it, The rest are, gone back to their office jobs or something.
So what I was saying before you jumped in, Dan, was I had put all the stories in fleas through that group.
Yeah, of course, right.
And And that got me to the really good first draft that I was able to go off and pay for a line edit for.
Yeah.
And it was because that group was so good that book came out as well as it did.
Yeah,
and
my short story collection too. Sing, like half of the stories in that collection are from the early 2000s.
Yep.
That I did with you guys. Remember, like afternoon television? That was
I love that story.
one of the very first ones that showed up in the book. So
that was the very first story you read at the 10th Area Regional Registry. I remember that story. And I was like, someone's worth knowing in here. So, yes.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, you're going to be in. So you're going to be in Monadnock Underground's anthology. What story do you have?
Demiurges and demigods in space.
That's
Yeah, both of you guys.
one, right? Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. I think I think when you showed the order, I'm like I'm in the first 5 stories or something.
You are. You're at the beginning somewhere.
I'm
Yep.
at the beginning somewhere. So my story is called Jobber. Dan, you haven't read it. But it's a superhero story, not a big surprise for me. All my Union Dues stories were explorations of super heroism through the fractured lens of what it would be like if superheroes really lived on Earth, and what sort of rules they'd have to follow to be successful, and what that would mean. But then I got kind of tired of those because deconstructing superheroes is being done all over the place now.
Yeah, and you were doing it before, like Heroes, and before.
I was doing that a long time ago.
What's the current one? The Boys or Boys?
Yeah.
Boys?
Yep. Garth Ennis' Boys. And so I was walking my dog on a Saturday morning, and I was thinking about, look, people have listened to this story by the time they get to this part of the podcast, right? So
yes.
I had been listening to I've been walking my dog and thinking about wrestling because my friend Bill, who loves wrestling, was at my house, and we had a conversation about wrestlers who were famous for not being famous, or jobbers, like guys who help the famous wrestlers become famous, like Bob Backlund and some of the guys that you don't recognize their names, like Leap and Lanny Poffo. Who knows who freaking Leap and Lanny Poffo is? Nobody. But his brother, Macho Man Randy Savage, because he beat the shit out of Leap and Lanny Poffo a bunch of times to become Macho Man Randy Savage. So I came up with this idea for a character whose job was pretty much just to get the shit kicked out of him until the superheroes came and saved the day. And I was like, I bet I could write a whole book about this. And then I sat down to write it, and I was like, I'm never going to write a whole book about this. So maybe the best thing I could do is tell one short story that encompasses everything that I would say in a whole book. And that's where Jobber kind of came from. The story of this guy, Mark, the Crimson Splash, whose job is to get wailed on mercilessly by space monsters and giant robots and shit until analogs for, I don't want to get us in trouble, but analogs for heroes that are more well-known come to save the day. Because they don't know what these monsters are capable of, so they need a flexible guy to wail on. And that's what his job is to make the other heroes look good.
Yeah, and Jeff, you're right. This is a genre that is fairly, I guess you could call it kind of en vogue right now, right? But I've reading it, I felt like it was still a very fresh take on it. And I mean, I was charmed right from the very beginning, like that, the image of this lower level superhero being at like a nerd convention, signing shit, being reduced to that, and having to make a living and make ends meet and that sort of thing. I mean, that sucked me right in.
Yep. Well, the characters are only interesting if they're relatable, right? There's an idea of you're familiar with the idea of masking. Now, superhero takes this to the extreme, right? But do you know what masking is when you're writing a character?
I should.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's you don't give them any real details. You don't give them any real details. You'll notice if you read a bunch of the stuff that I wrote for the Union Dues stories, and if in Jobber 2 is Mark doesn't have a hair color, Mark doesn't have a skin color, Mark doesn't have a height, Mark doesn't have a weight, Mark doesn't have facial hair that you know of, he doesn't have a hairstyle that you know of, because I want the reader to see themselves as Mark. So I describe Mark's scars a little bit, staples a little bit, bruises a little bit, the color of the uniform that he wore, the costume that he wears when he goes out to fight a lot, because that's something that people can latch on to that's not them. and I want them to put their reader's brain in Mark's brain while they're reading the story. And I've done that with all of the stuff that I've read to make him more relatable. I don't want to paint a picture of him for you to look at. I want you to think that you're him, you know?
Writers out there, I hope you're taking notes here because, I am. This is good stuff. One thing I want to ask you, Jeff, and we asked Dan this several months ago, so I'm going to ask you, and then we'll give Dan a chance to update his answer because it's quite a long time ago, really. At this point, it's in the scheme of a year in which all time kind of counts double, right?
Yep.
How has 2020 been on your writing, on your life in general, I guess, but I guess specifically on your writing?
Okay, that's a great question. I have more time to write because I have less stuff to do. So, truth be told, I have some long-standing health issues that I've always been dealing with like heavy-duty exercise. And right now I don't go to the gym because I don't want to be in a room full of people.
Yep.
So I have more time. And I've always made time to do that sort of physical stuff so that I'm putting my health first so that I can at the very least be alive until my daughter graduates from high school. And writing has taken a back burner to that some as I've, been working and staying healthy and learning to cook better and other things. But being forced to do things like I can't go roller skating because the roller skating rinks are closed. I don't want to go to the gym because the gyms are full of people full of friggin' COVID. I can't go to the movies because the movie theaters are closed.
Yep.
I already hate Market Basket and want to firebomb it when I go there just to buy groceries. So it's not like I go there and hang around. I don't go to the mall. I don't do anything. So I have more time at home. So my word counts have gone up. I've made a tremendous amount of progress working on a story called Park Place, which is a novel. I've made a lot of progress. I was able to finish Jobber, for example. I finished another story called Annie F., which is a horror story about a girl who wants to murder her elementary school classmate who's allergic to peanuts with a peanut butter laced kiss. Based on my daughter, but don't let her hear me say that. And that'll probably come out in the trial at some point where my daughter, who's put on trial for being a dictator, is eventually brought to justice, like the Nuremberg trials 50 years from now, and that'll come out as evidence. Should I tell you that story? I'll tell you that story. In 2013, we just moved into the house that I'm in now. Recovering through grief and all that stuff from my wife passing away from cancer, and finding things that are like constants are really important in dealing with grief. So I always watch, irrespective of president, the State of the Union address because I'm interested in how the year is being framed. So I'm sitting on the couch and I'm watching 2013 as President Obama give the State of the Union address. My daughter, who is 8 years old, is in her Hello Kitty pajamas, and she comes and sits next to me. And in second grade, 1 year earlier, has written down for what I want to be when I grow up as dictator. Sits next to me on the couch, and I'm watching the beginning of the presidential address. And she says, "What is this, Dad?" I said, "This is the State of the Union address." She says, "Oh, okay." And she says, "That's President Obama." I said, "That's right." And she says, "Okay. And that's Vice President Joe Biden, right?" I said, that's right. And she says, "That guy in the red tie, that's John Boehner. He's the speaker, right?" I said, "That's right. You really know what you're looking at. That's great." So then she says, "Well, who are the people in front?" I said, "Well, that's the Supreme Court." She goes, "Okay. And they're the ones who are in the robes." I said, "Yeah." She goes, "And who are the others?" I'm like, "Well, the gallery's filled with senators and representatives from both parties. They're sort of broken out by party affiliation on each side, and they're going to listen to the speech." And she says, "Okay. Who are the people at the top that they keep showing?" I said, "Well, those are the guests that the president has invited, and some of the senators have invited, and there's like reasons for them to be there that are probably not important for you, but they're there to make a point and be called out by the president during his speech, or to like intimidate the president based on who put him there." She goes, "Oh, okay. And what's the speech for?" And I said, well, this is like where President Obama or whoever the president is sets the agenda for the year and sort of plans out what sort of legislation he wants to see happen and gives a snapshot of how the last year was and what sort of initiatives he thinks the government should undertake and sort of does like a health check on how the government is working. She says, oh. And then she gets really quiet, like 10 minutes. She listens to the speech, President Obama's speech, and she very quietly and gently leans over to my ear and she says, when I run things, we're not going to do these. And then she got up and went upstairs to bed. And I was like, holy shit. So like I said, 20 years down the road, 20 years down the road or so, when she's in manacles in front of the Hague, they'll go get that story and say like, did your father write this about you? She's like, I love peanut butter, but I didn't kiss anybody to kill him. So
I love that. Wow.
Yeah.
I definitely thought you were going to say that your daughter just has a peanut butter allergy and you thought about killing her in that way, but this is about
There's a couple of different directions there, huh?
You guys do a horror anthology, you let me know and I'll send it.
Yeah, we probably will,
Yeah. So
we'd like to explore multiple different genres,
Yep. So I got some stuff. But yeah, so I that and I started another story which I had gone back and reread The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton. I don't know if you've ever read The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton, which I read it first in college, and I hated every syllable of. And then when I was 32 years old, I picked it up in spite, and I was like, The House of Mirth, ha! I don't know why I kept this stupid book. I hated this book when I read it in college. Ha! And I opened it, which was a mistake. And I sat down, which was a bigger mistake. And I looked at the first page, which was the biggest mistake. And I couldn't put the book down for a day and a half. I read the whole thing on the cover. I absolutely fucking love it. It's like Moby Dick. It's my second or third favorite book of all time. I love that book to the point where it's weird. Like I'll give it to people. Here, you should read this. Like, I don't even know you. Just take the book. Read about Bertha Dorset. If you like villains, man, she's got the shit on everybody. Like Bertha Dorset's amazing. And I started thinking about like, how would you write a character like Lily Bart today? That was somebody who was unmarried, was reaching that age of marital. There really is no age where you become a spinster anymore, but is getting to the point where you have to find a way to economically survive and you don't really have any skills and the class that you were in doesn't exist anymore. And I thought, I read all this stuff about like sugar baby and sugar daddy websites. I wonder how someone would get involved in that. What would that be like? So I've sort of taken on this task of reframing the ideas in The House of Mirth with a character who has access to the internet and internet dating and finds herself sort of bargaining herself out to older people for the trappings of life in society. And it's been fun to write. It's difficult, but it's been fun. So working on that too, and then slowly working through these stories based on obliquely on the life of Gigi Allen, New Hampshire's favorite rock and roll star, telling his story, a story of a character like him from the day of his death all the way back to when he discovered rock and roll in a series of 10 interlinked short stories told in point of view by people who knew him or interacted with him until finally he speaks in his own voice as a 14-year-old teenager. And I think I've got 4 of those stories out of the 6.
I remember one of those. I seem to remember one of those.
Yeah, I think I put all 4 of those through the group. So
cool.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's some really interesting. So, I mean, I think overall we could say this has been pretty good for you creatively.
Yeah, I can't complain.
Yeah.
I never thought I was an introvert until I was forced to stay home. And now I'm like, I can cope with this, It's all right. It's not terrible, But, I mean, I'm fortunate in that I have a steady job. I work for a state agency. So I have some job security. It meets the needs of my finances, barely, but it does. And I'm able to sort of hold things together. I don't have to do that scramble the way that I had to scramble so much in the past. And that gives me a little bit of freedom. That gives me a little bit of freedom to be more adventurous in how much time I can spend in front of the keyboard and how much time I can spend mapping out some other project that, sort of like the shiny object that drags my eye away from something I've already started to something that I want to start.
Yep. I know that very well.
But ultimately, like, my next big task is to finish the edit on the last of the Union Dues stories, of which there are 2. There are 3 completed ones that no one has seen before, and get that book together to put that out, because I still have a surprisingly large amount of fans across the planet who take great pains to chat and email me or hit me on Facebook to ask when it's going to come out. So once that's done, I'll be able to sell that a little bit. And then I can work on, getting the Park Place book done or finalized and other stuff. And, it's this weird, like, I have this weird compulsion to keep doing things. And again, I preface a lot of things by saying, let me tell you a story. I'm going to tell you another story, yet another story, as Dan would say. Is I had a friend who worked beside me at a company who was murdered. One of the things that I'll never write about is a murder anymore. Because you can't capture how fucking weird that is. You just can't. It's impossible.
That's weird. Yeah.
It's to come in and have, like, the state police all over the place, and you're like, and what are you all doing here? And it's like, well, this guy, he's not coming back today because he's been murdered. And like, murdered? Like, someone took and that's what happened. And there's a million questions and no answers. And even when you have answers, they don't make any sense. And I went to that guy's wake, his service, and I met his family, who were all spread out because he had children with multiple women and multiple wives. And all of them were like 19 and under, down to very young. And I sat and I watched this roll through of 20 or so pictures of his life. And that was all there was. And I thought, like, I barely know this person. And he's somebody that I'd driven around. I'd, like, taken him to pick his motorcycle up. I helped him move a couch into his house. I sat next to him for a year, and I barely knew him. He made no impact. He didn't live with his children long enough for them to be able to tell the tales of his life to their children.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't ever want that.
Yep.
I want to have something that's left behind, so that even if my children are rendered tongueless or unable to speak, to tell the story of my life, that something tells it for them, so that I have made an impact, so that I have left a mark bigger than that of a mosquito on the front of a windscreen, that I have left an impression for other people to speak of.
Yeah, no, that hits pretty close to home for me, because, I'm going to do something I always swore that I never would do, because I always, especially when I was younger, right, one of the things I hated the most was people who had children and then they were like, oh my God, it changed me, it changed the way I think about everything. I hate that shit, right? I still hate it. I refuse to do it, but except for right now, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to break my own rule here and say that what all that you just said, in terms of, like, I want these people to have enough time with me that they can tell my stories and their stories about me and all this stuff. I never gave a shit about any of that stuff until I had kids.
Yep.
And that is, like, probably the biggest change, is that once I had kids, I actually cared if I died.
Yep. Yep. That's absolutely true.
And not that I was ever, like, I don't mean that to sound like I was, like, I didn't care if I lived or died or I was suicidal or something. It wasn't like that, but I just had no real fear of death. It was like, yeah, whatever, like, what's the big deal? Until there were others involved, you know?
And that's a weird thing, like, with kids, like, and mortality. And I'm somebody who, I briefly mentioned that I have some health challenges, right? Well, I've been to the afterlife twice. It was no fun either time. And
did you actually see afterlife things?
Yeah, let me tell you what's at the afterlife. Here's how you can simulate it. You go to your basement, you find your closet that's down in your basement, you put yourself in the closet, you close the closet door, and you turn the light off. And then you say, is anybody here? Hello? I guess nobody's here. That's exactly what it's like in the afterlife.
Wow.
And,
and then you wake up to discover Sarah Palin as the vice president.
Yes, and I was just gonna say, I fucking wake up to Dan Szczesny in my intensive care unit hospital room reading the paper, and the first thing he says to me when I open my friggin' eyes is he points at the TV and he goes, "Did you see this?" And it was announcement that Sarah Palin was going to be John McCain's running mate, and I was like, "I think I'm dead, Dan. I think I'm dead still."
He was like under and groggy forever, and he looked like RoboCop, like he had all these tubes and stuff.
Dead or alive, you're coming with me.
So I would come, like Cindy was taking care of. So I'd come every day, and I was there for a couple of weeks, and then so it got to the point of where like I would just have this. I just come, and I'd be there for a couple hours. This is before UMA or whatever, and so I had a lot of time, and I'd pick up a copy of the Union Leader in the every day in the hospital, and I'd come up to his room, and I'd sit there, and I'd turn because he wasn't, he was out, so I'd turn the CNN on, and this was right in the middle of like McCain it was like he hadn't picked when Jeff went under, he hadn't picked his VP yet.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there, I'm reading the paper, and I hear this rustle, and I look up at the TV, and literally McCain is introducing Sarah Palin. Yeah. Like it's her acceptance speech as VP. And I hear this rustle, and Jeff's like, he like his eyes like shoot open, and I just close the paper, and I'm like, "Hey, you see this shit?"
Yeah, that was something else.
And Jeff's like, "Who the hell is that?"
Is that nutcase dumbass governor from Alaska?
Right,
it is. Oh boy, yeah.
That's what he woke up to. I was like,
that was
that's
so
a
funny.
hell of a way to come back.
Should have stayed out for a little bit longer. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
That was something.
So like the shorter version of that is like, once you say goodbye to your kids, and you're sure that that's the end, and it turns out not to be the end, you come back different. I came back different. I didn't come back any more spiritual because the closet is pretty fucking empty. But I came back with a lot more pragmatic approach to trying to stay alive and be a good person and achieve the creative dreams that I have and make a lasting impression on the world, because stuff is fleeting. And it just gets reinforced with things like my friend who was murdered. That just reinforces like, man, you got to make a mark. You got to leave an imprint. I think of those footprints that you find every now and then. Like, archaeologists are like, these footprints are 65,000 million years old. Look at them. And it's like some dude was just walking along collecting oysters, in friggin' whatever we call Serbia used to be, 65 million years ago. And there they are. I don't know who that guy was, but I know he liked oysters, and that's enough.
Yeah, I want to leave one of those footprints.
Right.
Yeah. All right, Dan, real quick before we wrap up, any updates on your year?
Well, yeah, remember like when we spoke last, it was like right at the beginning. It was only we were like a few weeks into this.
Yeah, it was early.
And our conversation was, well, we're gonna have to go through the summer with this, and then things will be back to normal in the fall. And like we're like, well, we got to deal with this for 3 months. It'll be okay. Yeah. We can find a way to do it. Yeah. So it's what, 9 months? March, April, May, June, July, August. 9 months later, here we are, and probably another at least next spring, right? 6 months, 7 months to go before anything. So at the time, when we talked, I was, Uma was home, and then we were going to go through summer, and then she was starting kindergarten.
Wow.
And that's not happening. So, she's being homeschooled now, and that's me and her grandma. So my time, in March, remember when we were talking in March about, well, I don't really have a whole lot of time anywhere, but don't worry, Al, I'm going to have more time in a couple of months. I actually have less time now than I did when we were in March, because it goes back to what the two of you were saying. I'm not, what are my options here? Spend time with her and teach her and be with her, or, what? Give her to a babysitter and write. And what am I going to do? I'm going to be with her. That's what I'm going to do. So that's what I'm doing. So my writing time and, my work time comes in between all of that. I mean, I'm lucky because I have, my career as a journalist. I'm able to write literally anywhere. I don't need all I need is a laptop, or all I need is a notebook, and I can write.
Right.
So, I'll squeeze some time in here and there, get things done, and make it happen. But basically, my life right now is taking care of her, taking my responsibilities as a dad and a husband, and in between all that, I writing, and then every so often do shit like this.
Yeah.
So
and that's pretty much my life too. I mean, I have two kids who I've always planned to homeschool. It's not a new pandemic thing, so it was a little less of a hectic start this year. But that's been the hardest lesson of parenthood is I don't have the training that you have, Dan. So it's really hard for me to get things done in snatches like that.
Yeah.
It's a constant struggle. So
the reverse is true. Full disclosure, by the way, when Zoe, when we realized, oh shit, Uma's not going back to school, Zoe was actually one of the people I came to and went, holy shit, how do I do this?
I don't know if
I got to teach her myself. What do I do?
Yeah.
So Zoe was very helpful to our family and giving us some pointers. And I mean, it's only kindergarten, whatever, who cares? But still, it's a big deal, and we don't want her to. I don't want her to be that feral of a child. So,
right.
we need some schooling to happen. So,
right.
So Zoe was one of the first people I came to and said, hey, it seems like your family isn't a bunch of wildebeests and in the jungle. You seem to be doing it. So how do you do it? Yeah.
See,
you've never met my children. They're pretty feral.
Yeah. That's right.
You got lucky. My kids went into this, as near adults almost as teenagers. So they're already friggin' drone honeybees who just stay in their honeycomb forever and never come out. Right. But I'm one of those Meg hasn't come out of her room in 7 hours.
Right.
Is she doing schoolwork, or is she having catfish chat with some dude who's buying her things from her Amazon wish list? And what the hell's my son doing? I can hear him kicking the door because he's answering telephone calls from work. But what's the next thing he's going to do? He's going to come downstairs. He's going to eat a handful of Triscuits and look at me and go now I kill, and then go back upstairs. It's I can't help them with anything. When my kids were old enough to need my help for shit in school, fortunately they were in school.
Yeah.
And as long as it didn't involve math, they were okay. But now it's thank God he comes to me and goes, what do you know about spanning tree? No habla. And he goes, Meg says, what do you know about calculus? No habla.
Yeah.
Good luck.
It's everything that I can do to just be go ask Alexa.
Right. Dr. Google is your friend.
How do you do this then? I don't know. Go ask Alexa. I'm busy.
Right. Jesus Christ. Look, I'm making spaghetti. Go away.
Why do you think we got Alexa?
Why don't you ask me a question about a past participle? Because you already know that stuff because you live with me.
Right.
You never ask me anything I'd help with.
And
where does the semicolon go in this sentence?
All I can say is thank God there's no math in kindergarten because oh boy, that's she's on her own. She's on her own when it comes to that. There's nothing I can do there.
I could just see Uma when she goes to kindergarten. They really start reading. It's with this the See Sam books, See Sam run. She's gonna say there's supposed to be a phrase at the end. Where is Sam going?
We're already there because think about it. So her grandmother is a former elementary teacher and she's Asian. So and her mother is Asian. Yeah. So she has this list of maybe it was even Zoe who gave it to us. We have this list of sight words, right? And we're working on our sight words. And by the end of kindergarten, she needs to know 25 of those 100 sight words. And then my wife is no, you're going to know all 100 of them. And you're going to know the pronouns and adjectives that go with them.
Right.
And you're going to put them in a sentence. And you're going to know how to recognize them. And I wanted this done by Christmas.
All right. And so by the time you're in third grade, they're already shopping you to Princeton.
Right.
So that, so that you can be that weird ass doctor who's 13 years old and hasn't hit puberty yet and has a residency in fucking Boston Hospital.
Right. Yeah. She'll walk into her first grade class with the complete set of Harry Potter books under her arm.
Right. Yes. Oh my God. Too funny. That's great.
I mean, unless you end up teaching first grade too.
Yeah, I know, and we're looking at it oh, it's only in March. I was it's 6 months away, and now it's oh, it's only 9 months away.
Yeah, right. I mean,
No, it could
we've
be.
learned to think of time in a different sort of scale, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can already see it when Uma asked, like, Dad, can you come and read to my class? And you're going to be like, sure thing, honey. And you go in and the teacher hands you the giant jam sandwich. And you're like, the giant jam sandwich? Right. You look at Uma, you're like, fuck this. And you throw it away. Kids, today we're reading Naked Lunch by William S. Burroughs. Uma's already read this twice, so calm down, honey,
That's funny. If I know we're running so late here, but this reminds me of another story with Jeff, which is like, Jeff is like that parent, you know what I mean? When it comes to school, and like he would take. I remember you taking like Ian's homework or Meg's homework and like correcting the teachers, like telling the teachers, and just being like, you missed. He's like that guy who goes to the parent. He's the one who the teachers hope doesn't come to the parent-teacher conferences.
Yep, that's me.
And for the longest time, I was like, oh, jeez, just let it go. And now that I have my own, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to be that parent.
Right.
Oh,
let me see the handout from school.
Right. Let me see your workbook. What? She said what? No. Like even in like preschool, right? So in like when she was in preschool, she came home once. And she was like, this was like this would have been last year. So about last year, about this time, and they were doing this little thing on Thanksgiving. And she came home and she was like, Daddy, the Pilgrims, they landed on Plymouth Rock. And I was like, oh, no, they didn't. Come on over here. Come on over here and sit down and let's learn what really happened.
Right.
And when you go back to school, I want you to tell your teachers what really happened. Yeah.
See, you're at the beginning, Dan.
Yeah.
So here's
right?
how that's going to progress, because I lived that experience too. Is
I have a
eventually
lot of conversations that are like, in response to a fact that was stated at me, and I take a deep breath and just say, well, sorta, but it's a little more complicated than that.
Right. Let me tell you about the Milk Massacre of 1491, where the Vikings and the Blackfoots got into a big fight over not being lactose intolerant. For me, it was, I think I had problems with Ian's elementary school because he got into trouble for drawing pictures of weapons in his notebook. And a zero tolerance policy for guns at school. I was called into school and I was like, why am I here? And the person was like, well, your son, he drew a hand grenade in his notebook. And I was like, right? Okay. Did he kill someone? Did he take his pants off and show his bleeck at people? Why am I here? I took the day off from work to come talk to you. It's like, we have a zero tolerance policy. Okay, a zero tolerance policy for what? For weapons, right? Did he bring a weapon? Nobody drew one. Yeah, okay. He's also wearing a fucking Star Wars shirt with a bunch of stormtroopers shooting lasers on it. Like, where do you draw the line? So, like, that starts my relationship with elementary school. And I come from a family of people who don't generally like teachers. My dad was awful to the teachers that I had as a kid. He was terrible. He accused my fourth grade teacher of hating children and gluing her eyes shut with super glue on purpose so that she could steal money from the town that we lived in. Again, yeah, this is for a whole other podcast. Like Jeff and Dan talk about education.
Right, yeah. And you should have met Jeff's father. Jeff's father, he was
something else. That guy.
He was something else. That guy, I loved your father. Yeah.
He was an amazing guy. And then when Meg's school switched over to the Readers Writers Workshop method, which you'll all get to know at some point in your terrible lives, which is where students are pegged into reading only at their grade level, so they never get to stretch.
Yeah.
And Meg was sent home with homework about Cartier exploring Quebec to build colonies for France. And Meg came to me, she goes, I don't know what to do with this. What am I supposed to do with this? And I said, well, go get me your vocabulary words, because your vocabulary words are probably all in this somewhere. She says, okay. And she gets me a list of rhyming words. And I was like, what the fuck are rhyming words? Why does it say hat, bat, cat, fat, mat, nat? Like, what is this? And she's like, well, we don't have vocabulary words. We have writing words. Oh, you do you? 4,000 words in this long-ass diatribe email to her English teacher and the English department and the Department of Education and everything else later. I'm in school in a principal's office saying, I don't want my daughter learning the Reader's Writer's Workshop method because this is bullshit. She gives me a book about the method that I took home and glossed. Like, glossing is writing in the margins.
Yeah.
I filled that book with so many friggin' Post-it notes with angry commentary. The book was like twice as thick as when she gave it to me. And I brought it back and I was like, I want you to read every single note while I'm sitting here. You know? Oh, yeah, they saw me coming. And it was like that every year of elementary and middle school with Meg. Yeah, they knew.
The writers' workshop people should have warned them you're coming.
The Reader's Writers Workshop from New York is terrible.
No, I mean like the writers' workshops that you destroyed. They should have warned the teachers.
They don't know that though, because none of the people that worked at the school came to those things. But it's a long story. We can have a whole other podcast on why Jeff doesn't like the Reader's Writers Workshop method. But
well, yeah, let's maybe do that sometime. Talk about education or something. But thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Dan.
Thanks for having me. I'm sorry that I took up so much time. This is actually Jeff's show. So.
It's all right. Yeah. We should do a podcast together. Like Jeff and Dan talk about shit and laugh a lot.
That's kind of what we do.
We should do that. We should all do that. No notes, no preparation. We just like talk for an hour.
You guys don't need notes.
Yeah, no. Who needs no stinking notes?
Dude, notes are for amateurs.
I know, that's true.
You guys don't need notes.
You're right.
Definitely thank you. And most likely we have another episode that we're hoping to release on Monday, and then hopefully this one can come out the following Monday. And basically we'll use this episode to announce the publication date of the collections, because we'll have that.
Awesome.
So it'll be a big, exciting thing. And Jeff, just a reminder for you, and Dan, we didn't tell you this because you weren't on at the beginning, but if you could just leave your browser window open for like 15, 20 minutes after we're done here, it's going to upload your audio and we'll be good to go.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. And to everybody who listened to Jobber, I hope you enjoyed it. It was fun writing it. And we didn't talk about it much, but you read the story, so there you go.
Yep, and what we will link to your books and podcasts and other ways that people can find you, Jeff. So those will be in the show notes, folks.
Great,
cool, can't wait.
Awesome.
All right, guys. Well, thanks again, and have a great night.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Zoe.